Welcome to Nightword Echo. Tonight, in 7 creepiest small-town horror stories from California, we wander through quiet streets where the lights go out too early, diners that never close but always feel empty, and neighborhoods where whispers slip through cracked windows long after midnight. These are chilling accounts of motels that never check you out, footsteps pacing behind locked doors, and houses that breathe even when no one lives inside. This is a new channel, and my goal this month is to reach 1,000 subscribers. Nearly 90% of viewers listen but never subscribe. Don't be one of them. Hit that button now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it in your corner of the night? If there's a small town in California or anywhere that gives you an uneasy feeling, type its name below. Because once you step into these places, not every street leads back out. Turn off the lights, silence the noise around you, take a slow breath, and let us begin. I'm not the kind of person who posts on Reddit. I read things sometimes. No sleep, let's not meet, on overnight layovers or when I can't shut my brain down, but I've never felt like I had something worth sharing. I'm a delivery driver, or was. I don't know what I am now. The last route I ran was I-40, late March, east to west, Albuquerque to Barstow. If you've done that drive, you know it's a ribbon of night with a few islands of buzzing light. Needles, California is one of those islands. A name that sounds uncomfortable and turns out to be exactly right. I stopped there because I had to. Low fuel, aching back, phone at 3%. The kind of desert wind that feels like a hairdryer set too angry. It was just after 2 a.m., a sliver of moon, a lot of stars. My GPS showed the turn. A slow sweep off the highway to an old 24-hour gas station with a flickering sign that just said gas in faded red letters. No brand, no logo. I had forgot who it used to be. There were 3 cars in the lot and a long-nosed Peterbilt that looked abandoned. Everything was either washed in that cold supermarket white from the canopy or glued into the black edges of the desert. The station itself had glass doors with sun-stripped stickers about beer specials and a handwritten sign that said restrooms for customers only in thick marker. The fluorescent lights hummed. If you spend enough time under them, you start to hear it under your skin. There was a single pump I could tell still worked, because the little LED showed numbers from the last sale. I pulled up, shut off the engine, and listened to the truck settle and the wind make a low, hollow sound over the empty car wash. I tried my card first. Swiped, chipped, swiped again. The screen told me to see attendant. Inside, the air tasted like old coffee and rubber bands. A fan rotated slowly from the ceiling but did nothing to move the heat. There was a figure behind the counter. The cashier was a thin guy around my age, mid-30s, wearing a gas station polo 2 sizes too big. He didn't look at me. He looked at the far corner of the ceiling, eyelids twitching like he was holding his breath. "Pump 3?" I said. He nodded without looking down. His name tag was crooked, half hidden in a fold. "Are you again?" The letters had bled from sweat and time. He had the kind of posture you get when you've been standing too long and forgot how to sit. There were 2 other customers in the aisles. A woman in a jean jacket reading the back of a bottle of radiator stop leak as if it held a recipe. A kid, maybe 20, with a skateboard tucked under his arm, staring at the hot case like the corn dogs were dangerous. Farther back, a man in reflective work pants stood near the beer fridge, his face mirrored by the glass. I registered all that in a glance, the way you do when you move through a new place and want to be polite and invisible. "Pump 3, I said again, in case he hadn't heard. "That pump's good," the cashier said, still not meeting my eyes. His voice sounded like sandpaper on a matchbox. "You just pay in here." "Okay." I took out my card. He slid the little plastic privacy screen in front of the reader like he was afraid someone would watch. "Still not looking at me. Rough night?" I said, trying to make it normal like any other station at 2 a.m. He blinked. It was the first movement of his face I'd seen. Not a smile. Not a nod. Just a blink that held too long, like it was a practice signal. He tapped the register with one finger.
"Zip code, I said it."
He typed too slowly. The printer rattled out a paper that smelled like burned sugar, and the drawer slid open. He gave me a receipt and a pen that didn't work until I shook it hard, and the whole time he was watching the far corner, not me. I followed his gaze out of habit. There was nothing there but a security camera and a water stain on the ceiling tile shaped like a melted face. When I turned back, the woman in the jean jacket was standing closer than she should have been. Not close enough to touch me, but close enough for me to notice the smell of her. laundry detergent and something metallic. She had the radiator stop leak held against her chest like a Bible. "Night like this," she said without saying hello, "you don't want to leave your doors unlocked." "I never do," I told her. "Because I don't. I've seen what thieves can do with 2 minutes and a half open window. Thanks." She nodded and went back to her aisle, but still watched me out of the corner of her eye the way the cashier watched the ceiling. The kid with the skateboard finally picked a corn dog, paid in crumpled dollar bills, and took exactly one bite before throwing the rest away with this careful, deliberate motion like he was crossing something off a list. Then he left without looking back. I pumped gas. The hose vibrated in my hand like a live thing. When the pump clicked off, the wind had picked up. Sand whispered across the concrete. Something in the empty car wash banged twice. Bang, bang. I looked toward the highway. No cars. Just a long stripe of darkness where semis should have been. Somewhere far out, a coyote yipped once, high and lonely. It made something under my ribs go tight. Back in the cab, I cranked the engine. My phone battery icon was a stubborn red sliver. The GPS said, "Continue west on I-40 for 144 miles. The voice was cheerful, like a teacher. I pulled out, tires making that gritty sound on the shoulder, headed back toward the on-ramp. And then, this is where I lose people. It wasn't the on-ramp. Or it was, but it came out wrong. I drove up, merged, checked my mirrors, settled in that long, empty lane. For maybe 2 minutes I was alone with the muted vibration and the white line and the hum that every car has when it's doing 70. And then the overhead lights of the station were in front of me again, flickering like a slow pulse. I thought, I must have taken a frontage road by mistake. I must have looped under the highway and come back around without realizing it. It happens in small towns. The road network does strange little bow ties. I told myself that, and it held until I saw the same long-nosed Peterbilt, like a piece on a board that someone hadn't moved, and the same 3 cars in the same spots. The pump's LCD still showed the last sale, $43.27. The red neon open sign buzzed in the window with that marginally different rhythm that felt like a breath out of sync with mine. I parked and sat for a long second. The engine idled. My hands were too tight on the wheel. I laughed once out loud. It came out wrong in the cab, like it belonged to the radio and the radio was off. People talk about fight or flight like they're the only 2 settings. There's a third one, normal. The human brain will walk you back into a burning room if the room wears the clothes of how things are. I turned the engine off and went inside because that's what you do when your brain can't accept that. Something has slid sideways. The cashier was at the counter. He hadn't moved. The fan rotated in its slow punishment. The water stain on the ceiling looked a little darker. Edges bled outward like a bruise. "Pump 3, I said. I heard my voice in my own ears. It sounded like I was trying to pass as someone else. He nodded. "You just pay in here," he said it the same way. Word for word. The same tired sand in his voice. But this time his eyes flicked past me just for a second like he expected someone else to be standing behind. I turned. The woman in the jean jacket was back near the automotive aisle, fixed on the radiator stop leak like she could read a future in it. The kid with the skateboard stood by the hot case chewing, and that made the hair on my arms rise because he'd thrown the food away last time. But he was chewing now as if he'd never stopped. The man in reflective pants had fogged the beer, fridge glass with his breath and drawn 3 vertical lines in it and then wiped them away with the heel of his hand as if, embarrassed, I paid again. The cashier's name tag still hid beneath the fold. I could almost read it this time. Ryan? Rowan? The printer rattled, the drawer slid open. His hands were very clean, the nails neatly clipped, the skin of a person who washes too much or washes to keep some invisible thing at bay. "Is there another way to the highway?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. I think I got turned around. "There's only the way," he said. He didn't look at me. "You just take the ramp." "Right." "Keep your doors locked," the woman said without looking up from the bottle. Her voice was different, flatter, like she'd been practicing the sentence too long and it had lost meaning. When I went back out, the pump numbers had reset to 0 as if daring me to feed it again. I didn't. I got in, started the engine, and this time I tried the opposite direction. The frontage road ran parallel to I-40, then curved out into the dark. No lights, the station shrank in the mirror. The farther I went, the more wrong the desert looked, like someone had drawn the plants from memory and set them at the wrong angles. It made me think of a stage set. plywood cutouts painted to look like creosote and chala. After maybe a mile, the road sloped down. I relaxed a little. Then the headlights caught the white of a sign. Gas in faded letters. Same ragged neon open, same lot. The long-nosed Peterbilt waited with its dead face. I didn't drive in at first. I idled at the edge of the lot, hands shaking now, and watched as if I could catch the trick. The hum of the canopy lights drew a line in the night like the world had a seam and someone had stitched it crooked. A tumbleweed hit my bumper and rolled away without bouncing, like air didn't apply to it. That's when I saw the highway patrol car. It eased into the lot without a siren. Just the presence, the way cops can arrive like they've been there the whole time. The trooper inside was a tall woman with a narrow face and hair braided so tight, it had a different shine than the rest of her. She parked by pump 1, got out and adjusted her belt. She didn't look at me. She walked toward the door like a person who sees a problem they already understand. I put the truck in park and followed her in because if the laws of traffic and geography weren't applying, at least the law might. The chime above the door gave a half-hearted bing. The trooper nodded at the cashier with the kind of tired politeness people use when they've been in the same conversation one too many times. "How's it going tonight, Rowan?" she asked, and my chest went cold because now I had the name and it landed with the heavy certainty of a puzzle piece. Rowan. His tag said R-N, and he winced when she said it, like the sound of his own name was a bruise. But he still didn't look up. "We're good," he said. "You're late." "I know," she said quietly. "Where are we?" Rowan's eyes fluttered at the far corner of the ceiling. "You know." "We're at the station," the woman in the jean jacket said from the aisle, and her voice had that flat, rehearsed thing again. "Night like this," she added, "you don't want to leave your doors unlocked." The trooper's face didn't change. She looked at me then, really looked, and there was a human being behind her eyes. Not empty space. "Sir," she said, "you okay?" "No," I said. The word came out too fast. "I keep leaving and I keep coming back. I'm not trying to—" I gestured helplessly at the glass door and the night beyond. "I'm not trying to be here," she nodded. "Yeah, well, take a breath." She stepped closer and dropped her voice. "How many times?" "Twice," I said. "This is the third." "That's still early," she said in the tone of someone saying, "That's a small cut. What were you doing before you got off the highway the first time?" "Driving? Thinking about anything?" she asked as if it mattered. "Just tired, a fight with my ex. Nothing dramatic, why?" Her eyes slid to Rowan and back. "Because the thing wants something to sit down in. Thoughts help. You're tired. Tired is good for it." I said nothing because any choice of words felt like a guarantee I'd sound crazy. She extended a hand like we were being introduced. "I'm Trooper Marisol Dean. Evan," I said. "Okay, Evan," she said. "You need to remember something ordinary that belongs only to you. I'll walk you out to your truck. You're going to leave the lot and you're going to drive straight until the station is behind you. If you see it again, you don't stop this time. You do not come in." She said that part like she'd said it before. "No matter who waves you down. Who would, doesn't matter," she said. "You'll know them. That's the worst part. You'll know them and they'll be wrong. Keep your doors locked." The woman in the jean jacket echoed her line like a call and response in a church. "Keep your doors locked." Trooper Dean turned to Rowan. "You holding?" His hands were flat on the counter. The veins stood up in them. He swallowed. "I'm trying." "You're doing good," she said. "You're doing real good." The man by the beer fridge turned and I finally saw his face. It was almost handsome, but his eyes were pale like someone had washed them in too much light. He smiled, his teeth were very straight. "You're not supposed to tell him," he said pleasantly. The trooper didn't look at him. "Evan," she said, "time to go. I don't know why I trusted her." I'm not saying it made sense. It was just a voice like someone who had stayed up too many nights already and would stay up 100 more because there wasn't another option. I followed her out. The air hit me like a hand. The wind had died. The heat had thickened. The sky hummed with the same fluorescent tone as the canopy, as if the lights had spread. "Remember something ordinary," she said again, walking beside me. "Something only you know all the way down." "The way my dad used to fold his receipts," I said, surprising myself. He'd fold them the long way twice, then into a little square that fit under his watch band. "Good," she said. "Stay with that. Touch it in your head. Do the folds." We reached my truck. She stood by the door and didn't touch the handle. "You're going to see me again in a minute," she said. "It won't be me." You understand? I don't, I said. But okay. You're going to want to listen. It won't be me. She stepped back. Go, I drove. I didn't look in the mirrors at first because it felt like looking would be an invitation to whatever was behind me. I held the image of my dad's hands. He had burn scars on 2 fingers from back when he worked a line in a kitchen. He always had a pen behind his ear. He'd fold the receipt the long way, turn it, fold again, the paper making that small cracking sound like a joint. The little square under the watch band would leave a faint indent when he showed me the trick. It was nothing. It was the most ordinary thing. But it was mine. The station's glow fell off the windshield. I counted out loud. 1, 2, 3. I didn't know why, but I did. The frontage road slipped into desert. The horizon opened. For a second, I felt it. The world like it's supposed to be big and indifferent. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. And then the headlights picked up the gas sign. It wasn't the same lot. I mean, it was, but it had shifted minutely, like someone had nudged the set between takes. The long-nosed Peterbilt was closer to the door. The open sign flickered faster and then steadied. 2 men stood by pump 1 arguing with their hands, but their faces were perfectly still as if the hands were someone else's. I kept driving. My body wanted to stop. There's a gravity to lit places in the dark. Your animal brain wants inside, wants human voices, wants clean floors and a coffee machine. I gripped the wheel and whispered, long fold, square, like an idiot, like a prayer. Something moved at the edge of my headlights. A woman stepped out, lifted her hands to wave me down. She wore desert boots and a state trooper's hat, and her braid reflected the light just the same way. She looked right at me. Her mouth formed my name exactly correct, Evan. I didn't stop. The wheel shook under my hands. The truck didn't like it. She took a step into the lane, then another, holding her palm out. When I was close enough to see her eyes, they were the wrong color. Not brown, not blue, not green, a color I don't have a name for that split when the lights hit it. The truck dove and then corrected itself like I'd drifted. She didn't jump back. She didn't need to. She was beside me, then in the mirror again in a place that didn't let her be in both. Keep driving, I said out loud. My voice just a wire barely carrying a current. Keep your doors locked. It was stupid, but it anchored me. The station fell behind. The sky got bigger. The fan in the ceiling I'd left behind wouldn't stop turning in my mind. I thought about the kid with the skateboard, the way he chewed. Did he get to leave? Did he start over each time? Did he stand at the hot case in a loop forever, taking the same bite? What happened if you forgot there was a world? A shape bloomed in the darkness of the road ahead. I braced. It wasn't the gas station. It was a curve I hadn't seen before, banks of rock rising on either side like shoulders. The truck's tires sang. My hands eased. I laughed again, this time for real and ugly. Okay, I said to no one. Okay. The road opened into a flat stretch. A blue sign glowed. Rest area 2 miles. It was the IRS tone of official blue. It was exactly right. I wanted to cry with relief. I checked my mirrors, night, just night. In the passenger seat, my phone vibrated once with a little shock of life, and then died completely. I didn't care. I put my blinker on like it mattered to the emptiness. I pulled into the rest area and parked wrong across 3 spots because my arms had decided to stop taking instructions. The lights were those low yellow ones that make moths suicidal. A vending machine hummed. A man in a Dodgers cap slept hunched forward at a picnic table, his hand still in a bag of chips. A bathroom door closed somewhere with a hollow thud and a desultory flush. I sat there with my forehead on the top of the wheel until I could breathe without counting it. I texted my dispatcher from the dead phone out of habit before I remembered it was dead. I laughed again because my brain needed to. Then I went to the vending machine and bought a water, and it tasted like plastic, and it was the best thing I've ever had. The rest area map said I was 24 miles past Needles. That made no sense even with a generous rounding. I stood there with the water bottle at my chest and watched the highway beyond the fence. Cars moved again, their headlights making that passing shush you can feel under your ribs. You don't realize how much you rely on the steady pulse of other people until it goes silent, and you can hear your own teeth. A trooper car pulled in. My stomach dropped and then rose as the driver got out. It wasn't Dean. It was a heavy-set man with a mustache and the kind of walk of a guy who'd done this job a long time and didn't expect a lot of surprises. He scanned the lot with a flashlight. It slid over the sleeping Dodgers cap and the empty dog run and then landed on me. "You all right?" he asked. I opened my mouth. I closed it. I said, "Do you know Trooper Dean?" He frowned. "Dean who?" "Marisol." He shook his head. "Not in my district." "Where are you coming from?" "New Mexico," I said. "Headed to Barstow." "Long drive," he said, like that explained everything. "Get some rest." "Lot of weirdos out tonight." "Yeah," I said. "Weirdos!" He left. I sat in the truck until my hands stopped betraying me. I tried to sleep, but the rest area felt too exposed in the same way the gas station felt too enclosed. I got back on the highway when other taillights gave me courage. The road met me like it had never done anything but lie straight and patient. Barstow happened. Then Victorville. Then the particular burn of LA air at dawn. I delivered my load. I left the keys on the office hook like I always did. My dispatcher clapped me on the shoulder and asked if I wanted another run, and I told him I needed a day. And he nodded like men nod to other men who are about to cry but don't want to. I slept that night with the TV on low to trick my lizard brain that someone was talking in the next room. I dreamed of the water stain on the ceiling tile. You want the tidy ending. I went back in daylight with friends and found a normal station, and Rowan rolling his eyes and telling me I must have taken the wrong road. I didn't do that. If you're a driver, you know superstition isn't a game. There are places you don't poke on purpose. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. "Evan," a woman said. "Yes, this is..." She paused. "You can call me Mari." I didn't breathe. "You did good," she said. "Most people don't the first time. You need to understand the station isn't a place. It's a mouth. It doesn't eat fast. That's why it needs help." "Rowan," I said. "Rowan holds it shut," she said. "Every time someone goes in, they make the walls stronger without knowing. Sometimes a person like you walks in and you don't fit right. You're tired in the wrong way. Your thoughts get your feet stuck and it tries to keep you. But if you're early enough, you can walk out." "Why me?" "Why anybody," she said. "I'll tell you a thing. Don't go back. Not on purpose, not to prove something." Her voice warmed, softened. "Keep your doors locked." "You weren't real," I said, but it came out like a question. "I was real enough," she said. "You did good. How did you get my number?" "Stop asking the part that doesn't matter," she said gently. "Ask yourself why there are always a few cars at a place that shouldn't survive. Ask why the hot case is always full. Ask why the fan never stops turning. If you don't want to know the answer, don't ask." She hung up. I changed routes after that, switched to day shifts, local runs, places with ugly morning traffic and kids in backpacks and coffee that tastes like melted crayons. It helps. So does saying my dad's receipts in my head when I get nervous. Long fold, square. The words have edges I can grip. Sometimes the dream comes back. I'm standing in the automotive aisle, holding a bottle of radiator stop leak to my chest and waiting for someone to turn and look at me long enough to call me by my wrong name. Sometimes it's the other way. I'm behind the counter with my hands flat and the name tag folded out of sight, staring at the stain in the ceiling like it's the only way to keep the roof from falling in. There's one more thing. If you drive through needles at night and feel your hand steer a little toward the shoulder because you want the safety of lights, and the price of gas doesn't seem so bad and the restroom is for customers only and that feels fair, please keep going if you can. Do it for me. Do it for the kid with the skateboard, who I think about chewing forever. Do it for Rowan, who may be there still, holding the edges together with clean hands that shake. And if you don't keep going, if you have to stop, pay inside. Sure. Be polite, don't stare at the wrong things. When you leave, don't look back at the door. If you see a trooper with a neat braid and eyes the wrong color, drive on. She isn't me. She isn't anyone. Not anymore. Keep your doors locked. I'm not from Kousa. We moved there last fall because my wife got a job at the clinic and rent in Sacramento was turning us into ghosts anyway. Kousa seemed like a harmless place to regroup. Flat fields, low river light, a water tower with peeling paint, and 2 coffee shops that closed by 6. We rented a small house off Bridge Street with an almond orchard starting right behind the back fence. My son Leo was 8. He liked the smell of the irrigation water when it first hit the dust, like rain faking it. At first, the town felt like the kind of quiet that stitches you back together. I work IT remotely, and our neighbors were mostly field hands and older couples who complained about harvest dust in the same friendly tone they used to offer you tomatoes. The only drama I heard about in that first month was a dog that kept digging under fences and a kid who spray-painted a smiley face on the elevator at the rice co-op. Then at the diner on Market, people started talking about the silhouettes. They were careful with the word like it might embarrass them. "You ever catch someone walking," the waitress said to no one in particular, "but you only see them when you're not looking?" A guy at the counter laughed like a cough. "Peripheral visitors," he said. "Always been some." He had a cap that read Kousa. Someone had printed the U wrong and no one cared enough to fix it. "What do you mean always?" I asked. He shrugged. "Ditch bank walkers. You see 'em by the orchards.
If you try to look at them dead on, they're gone.
You can't photograph nothing but the edge of them. Like heat." He went back to stirring his coffee. "I thought it was local color, a ghost story in a town that needed one." 2 nights later, I took the trash out, and in the corner of my eye, a man crossed our backyard. I spun, and there was nothing but low almond trees and the shack where the pump lived. I told myself it was my shadow in the floodlight. It was almost funny how hard my heart was pounding, like I could scare it back into a normal rhythm by mocking it. You'd think you'd get used to that jolt. You don't. Leo started drawing tall shapes in the margins of his homework. Not monsters, just black outlines like you sketch a person when you're in a hurry. At dinner, he kept glancing over my shoulder, smiling. "He's back," he'd whisper. "Don't look, I told him to knock it off." I tried to keep my voice light. Our neighbor, Mrs. Rivera, was the first to say it seriously, face tight, no joke left. She and her husband had lived there since the 80s, long enough to let their windows warp to the heat. She brought over cilantro and told us to keep our curtains closed facing the orchard after sunset. "They don't like the windows," she said. "They like the gaps. Spaces where you could be looking but you're not. Corners, hallways." "Who?" my wife asked. "She's practical to the point of stubbornness. Her name is Janelle and she works triage. She thinks a problem you can't measure is a rumor." "The shadows," Mrs. Rivera said. She crossed herself so quickly I barely saw it. "We don't stare at them. If you stare, they don't go away. They come closer when you blink." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "So the solution is don't blink?" Mrs. Rivera didn't laugh. "Pay them no mind," she said. "That's the old advice. But this year they're paying mind to you." She meant me. I felt something twist in that. "Why me?" "You're new," she said, like that was a reason. I wish I could say I rolled my eyes and forgot it. Instead, I started noticing how often I was catching a body that wasn't there. In the grocery store aisle, the suggestion of a shoulder 2 feet to my right. On the levee by the river, a figure standing below where no one should be after the floods rutted the bank. At home, the sensation of someone tall at the end of the hall. A presence the way cold air is a presence. When I looked straight, I saw nothing. When I looked back to the side, there was the weight of someone again. A smudge etched into my awareness more than my sight. The weird thing was the town accepted it. Not happily, but like you accept the way the fog sits on the field some mornings, slow and stubborn. The librarian taped construction paper over the side windows. The crossing guard started wearing an orange visor with a long side flap. I overheard men in boots at the hardware store comparing where they'd seen the edge of one. Like you compare where you spotted a coyote. The second week of November, the clinic had a community night. Flu shots, blood pressure checks, a table of stale cookies. In the multipurpose room, a deputy gave a presentation about situational awareness. He said petty thefts had crept up. He said if you see something, say something. The slide behind him showed a photo of our very orchard, the tidy rows like a chapel. I could feel Leo's hand slip into mine, fidgeting. He asked to use the bathroom. Janelle nodded, distracted by a woman asking about rash creams. I watched Leo walk down the hall. I looked away to answer a man asking me what I thought about fiber internet out here. I looked back 1 second later, and for a heartbeat, I caught a small dark movement at the far end of the hall. A child height shape. Leo turned toward it like you turn toward your name. I was already moving before I knew I was moving. I got to the end of the hall and there was nothing but a side door propped with a rubber wedge, humming with a strip of night. "Leo?" I pushed through into the cool air. You can see forever in this town until you can't. The orchard starts and the world becomes aisles. Night in the rows is a tunnel you walk into because you're sure the end is around the next tree. "Leo," he answered once, faint. I couldn't tell if it came from straight ahead or 2 rows over. "Dad," a man in a denim jacket near the parking lot said. "He probably cut through." They do that, he meant kids. He meant there was no reason to panic. I ran anyway, in dress shoes that chewed my heels through the aisle between 2 blocks of trees. The ground was rutted where the water had run. I turned left and the sound of my breath sounded wrong, like there was a second breath braided into it. When I turned right, something tall kept pace with me in the next row over, only visible when I kept it to the side. If I snapped my head, there was nothing. If I looked ahead again, I could tell there was a body matching my speed 1 tree over, silent. "Leo," I shouted. The word felt too loud and too small. I reached the pump shack and the little clearing where the farmer keeps spare lengths of pipe. A half moon threw a thin ribbon of light. I told myself if I just listened hard enough, I could parse this town's sounds. Crickets, faraway highway, irrigation noise, leaves weighing the night down. I heard a soft scuff at my back. I turned too fast and my brain tried to fill in the absence of a figure with static. My eyes watered in the dark. I took a breath and did what sounded insane even in the moment. I tried not to look at anything directly. I let my eyes relax until edges came into being, until I wasn't searching so much as letting whatever wanted to be seen exist on the side of my vision. There were 3 of them. I couldn't see faces, not because there weren't any, because faces are details and details live in the center of your sight. What you get in the corner is category, height, weight, proximity. 3 human-shaped gaps, standing at an angle that made me feel like my kneecaps belonged to them. If I blinked too long, they felt closer when the world snapped back into focus. Like they were walking the distance in the slice of nothing while my lids were down. I did not run. Running felt like holding a match in wind. I took my phone out and acted out the dumbest instinct I've had as an adult. I brought up the camera. I tried to make it capture what my eyes wouldn't. Through the screen, there was nothing but trees. No smudges, no loss. I wanted so badly to isolate a pixel and say, see how around it the world bends? But there was only the fact of the orchard and me inside it. "Leo," I tried again, not loud now, pleading. He answered to my left this time, closer, like a kid who had followed a butterfly and realized it had led him somewhere odd. "Dad, don't move," I said. "Talk to me. I see him," Leo said. "I can see him if I don't look." I moved slow. I kept my eyes loose. Every part of me itched to lock onto angles, to force the world to resolve. Instead, I let the trees be trees and the night be night and the 3 not quite there bodies be an ache I kept in my peripheral, like holding on to cold. A boy-sized shape appeared between 2 trunk shadows. A small shoulder, a head ducked. I kept my gaze ahead and reached a hand out to the side. My fingers grazed hair. Warm, real. I wanted to squeeze him so hard he'd squeak. I wanted to drag him back to the clinic and the fluorescent lights and the table of stale cookies and tell everyone whatever it is out here does not care if you've got sign-in sheets and clipboards. "Dad," he said again, but the word was not for me. He was still looking past my shoulder. "Let's go," I said. "Don't look." We did the ugliest dance through those rows, a slow backward sideways shuffle that probably looked ridiculous from above. I did not let my eyes harden, not even when a 4th shape joined the 3 and tracked our steps. I counted my blinks like someone clinging to a ledge counts breaths. 1, 2, 3. I made each blink short, like if I kept the darkness in the world as thin as a coin, they wouldn't cover distance. It felt like bargaining with a river. When we reached the edge of the trees and the breadth of the clinic's parking lot opened like a gasp, the shapes peeled away. Or maybe they were never there and the world just remembered itself. Janelle stood under the light with her hands on her hips and relief and fury fighting it out on her face. "What were you thinking?" she asked Leo after she hugged him. "You don't run off in the dark, ever." "I didn't run," he said. "I was following him." He pointed to no one. "You can't look," he told her, earnest. "If you look, they hide." The deputy with the slideshow came over and asked polite questions about what happened. He took a statement like this was a normal thing to have a process for. He made me spell our last name twice as if it mattered that paperwork be neat when the world had just tilted by a degree. We got Leo home and into bed. He fell asleep fast like kids do after a scare. Janelle and I lay awake listening to the walls breathe, to the slow drip of the kitchen sink. She doesn't spook easily, but that night she kept her hand on my arm like an anchor. "Do you believe in them?" she asked finally. "I believe in whatever had our kid walking into a field at night," I said. "I believe in that." The town didn't have a name for them that felt right. Shadows made them sound like something cast by light. They felt like the opposite, like places light forgot. Mrs. Rivera called them los del borde, the ones on the edge. Maybe they are just old eyes playing tricks, she told me on her porch the next afternoon, like she was giving me an exit if I needed one. But my mother said you treat tricks like teeth just in case. I tried to be scientific. I set up the floodlight to face the orchard. I installed a motion sensor camera. For 2 nights it sent me clips of moths blundering through the beam and the wind moving leaves like hands. On the 3rd night it recorded nothing but static from 2:11 to 2:16 a.m. When the picture came back, something had knocked the floodlight askew, so it shone straight into the pump shack. I sat out back with a headlamp and a folding chair and a thermos of coffee like a man waiting for deer. The headlamp gave me a circle, and the circle made me brave, and the bravery made me stupid. I stood to take a leak, and there he was, one of them, only backlit by my own lamp. Not there when I looked. Thick as grief when I didn't. The beam cut around him like he was a hole. "What do you want?" I asked out loud, immediately hating that I'd formed a U. It didn't answer. It didn't move. It just waited in the unlooked-at part of the yard. Patient, I tried ignoring it. That worked until the pump kicked on and the hum filled up the space where silence had been. And in that hum, I heard footsteps align themselves with mine. An imaginary rhythm you can't shake. I tried talking. I tried asking dumb questions like, "Do you know me? And where did you come from?" I tried praying into the space like a man who only remembers the 2 easy lines. They didn't care. The next week, the town went on like a town has to. School, church, grocery bags. The silhouettes threaded through all of it. A problem nobody agreed to write down. A cashier told me she'd quit training herself to look straight because it gave her headaches. A teenage boy showed his friend how to angle his phone sort of sideways while filming, like there was a hack. The deputy did not laugh when I asked if he'd ever found a person who wasn't a person in these fields. "We find people sometimes," he said. "We don't always find them soon." Janelle told me I was letting it take me over. She put a hand on my chest and told me to come back. I wanted to. I wanted to be the dad who made pancakes and the husband who fixed the leaky faucet without muttering at it like it had done him wrong. But when you know something can reach sideways and pluck the most important thing from your life, you think about the sideways all the time. Leo, to his credit or doom, wasn't afraid. He started leaving little things by the back fence, a Lego figure with one arm, a baseball card of a player I'd never heard of. "For them," he said when I asked. "For who?" "For the ones who have to walk there." "Who told you that?" He thought about it. "They did, I guess." He frowned like the answer surprised him, but not with words. I took the Lego and the card and brought them back inside. I told him we don't feed stray animals because then they never leave, and I realized how stupid I sounded, because that implied they were animals and that leaving was a thing they did. That Friday night there was a vigil. A girl from 2 streets over had gone missing the month before, which we hadn't known when we signed the lease because you don't ask those questions when you're tired and you need a place. People gathered at the church and lit candles and sang about a river and hope, and the trick of keeping your candle from guttering in the breeze felt like the trick of staying whole. The pastor said something about light that tried very hard to be practical. I stood near the back and kept glancing at the exit. Like what I feared would come through was not sorrow, but a shape that only exists when you're not testing it too hard. At the end, the pastor asked anyone who had seen anything to come forward and tell the deputy. No one did. We all stared at the coffee urn as if it mattered. Leo slept in our bed that night. Around 3 a.m. I woke to the pump and the particular hush the house carries when it decides it is a boat. I had the impulse to check the back door, but I lay very still. "I had learned that attention is a kind of door too, Dad," Leo whispered. I thought he was dreaming. "Yeah, buddy," I whispered back. "Don't look," he said. "He's standing in the doorway." I didn't turn. I looked at the wall and let my eyes relax until the wood grain became less wood than pattern. In the leftmost edge of my vision, the bedroom doorway held a tall figure, far enough not to trigger fight, close enough that my scalp went cold. I felt the old childish logic bloom: if I don't look, it can't see me. But that was wrong for these. They preferred the milk of your attention, skimmed from the edges. I stared at the wall like I loved it. I counted. I kept my blinks quick. The pump droned. The figure did not move, but it was also never exactly where it had been last. "Is he the same?" I asked Leo, quiet. "Yes," he said like he was reporting the time. "He's from the orchard. He wants you to come outside." "How do you know?" "He's pointing." I did not look to check. What happens if I don't? I asked. He waits, Leo said. They're good at waiting. I have never been brave and I have never been a coward long enough to make it a habit. I've only ever been a father, which is a complicated third thing, fear hooked to a motor. I got out of bed and walked sideways out of the room like a man inching along a ledge, center of gravity against the mountain. The figure at the doorway receded without receding. I went down the hall and into an air that smelled like wet dirt. The back door was ajar by an inch, the way a room you thought you'd closed sometimes persuades itself open. Outside, the yard looked normal under a thin moon. The fence shone faintly. The orchard whispered the way tree leaves do when the night is pretending to be water. I stepped into my shoes and onto the grass, and the edge of my vision filled like a cup. There were more tonight. It felt like standing in a crowd and pretending you aren't. I couldn't have counted them even if I'd tried. Not because they didn't have a number, but because numbers live in the center, where they want you to look. I saw one at the far right of the yard and one near the pump and one where the fence gate is. And then I realized one was a trick I was playing to keep from understanding that the yard had more not people than people in it. You can have me, I said. I didn't plan it. The words fell out of the part of me that bargains. The orchard listened. So did whatever calls itself a shadow when you won't name it. But you have to give him back, I said. And only then did I hear how that sounded because Leo was asleep in my bed. The image of him there put a film of sweat on my hands. I went through the gate. I didn't take my headlamp. The night disliked being burned into a tight circle. In the rows, the air is different. It's cooler, like the trees make a ceiling. The ground is full of the burrs that hitch rides in your socks. I walked the line between trunks. Once I misjudged a step and my shoulder brushed bark, and a small shower of dried leaves fell, and the sound made every part of me want to break into a run. I didn't. I kept my hands where I could see them and my eyes soft like I was learning to trust again. He spoke to me. Not with words, not even with a voice. More like when you realize someone is behind you and you know what they want you to do without turning. He said, "Come." The edge of my sight filled with small figures then. Not many, not heavy. Kid-sized gaps pattering soft through the grass. A slick panic tried to crawl into my throat. I swallowed hard enough to hurt and forced myself to remember lemonade stands and soccer goals, and the way Leo's ears go pink when he's excited. I kept them in the corner and I did not look. He led me to the irrigation ditch, the one that runs a straight line to the levee and then bends like a finger. The water was low and slow, the pump farther off making it breathe. I realized with a physical awareness that if I went down there, the bend cut me off from the lights of the house completely. Whoever stood above could watch me and I could pretend I was alone. Maybe we make our own ghosts by breaking our sight lines. At the bend, something small sat on the mud. I picked it up without looking at it and shoved it into my pocket the way you shove a live thing there so you won't drop it. I didn't have to look to know it was Leo's shoe. I recognized the weight. One heel still had the sticker the clerk forgot to peel off. Where? I asked the orchard. He answered with another nudge farther. He wanted me near the culvert where the ditch goes under the farm road. I could not do it. There is a line between foolish and faithful, and mine has always been closer than I'd like to admit. I won't go under, I said, out loud like it mattered to say it to someone who lives in angles. Behind me, a small, soft sound came like a child trying on a cough. I let my eyes open wide to the side, and there was a kid-height figure standing a foot away, no details, an outline cut from the world. I lifted my hand without turning and splayed my fingers. A thin, cool hand pressed back. For a second I was sure. I was certain like I have only been certain twice in my life. Once when I knew I would marry Janelle, and once when I knew we would have Leo. For a second I held my son's, and don't look, he said, not through air, but directly in the part of my brain that lights up when your kid points at a bird. He said, don't look and don't stop. I don't know how long I stood in that ditch with my arm extended, holding a hand that was and wasn't. My calves burned. My shoulders shook. I tried to keep my blinks shallow as if I could sand them down. The orchard's breath moved back and forth like a tide. Every time I almost turned, the edges went thicker, as if the world warned me, center your eyes and you will center the wrong thing. When I couldn't bear it anymore, I did the thing I swore I wouldn't. I looked. I turned and let my gaze snap to where the hand was, and there was nothing. A rush of emptiness, like when you think there's a step and your foot keeps going. I made a sound I didn't know I could make. I fell up the bank, grabbing roots filthy. I ran. All my careful backward steps burned. I didn't stop at the fence. I stumbled into the yard and into the house and down the hall and into the bedroom. Leo breathed the open-mouthed breath of a boy asleep in a bed that is too big when you're small. I sat on the floor and cried quietly because the noise of panic felt like bait. In the morning, his shoe was missing from the mudroom. Both pairs were on the mat, clean enough. The thing in my pocket wasn't a shoe. It was a ball of orchard twine tied in a knot so tight I've never been able to untie it. After that, he came less like a man at the doorway, and more like a reflection I didn't mean to catch. In the microwave's shine, in the black TV screen at night, a tall parenthesis waiting for me to turn. He never stepped into the center. The center was mine. I tried to make that a rule. A week went by like that. I took Leo to school. I made lunch. I went to the grocery store where the cashier wore earplugs so she wouldn't whip her head every time someone came up behind her. I told myself I had imagined the hand. Then I'd touch the twine in my pocket and my chest would hurt. I kept it even when Janelle said I should throw it out. She has not forgiven me for not being the man who believed in simpler explanations. The last night, if there is a last night, did not announce itself. It was Wednesday. We ate spaghetti. Leo told us about a science project where they grew beans and one sprouted a curly white root like a thread. He said, "You can't stare at a seed either. It grows when you don't look." After he fell asleep, I lay awake listening to a train that wasn't there. This place is full of sounds that remember. Around 2, the pump started. Our headboard hummed a soft, sympathetic vibration. I did not want to go outside. I wanted to suffocate the world with my attention until nothing could move. I realized that is maybe how you make the very thing you fear. "Don't," Janelle said. She was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Please." "I won't," I told her. It felt like a lie told tenderly, like changing a subject when your friend is crying. I lay there until the pump cut off and the night snapped crisp. In the silence after a machine stops, you learn what your house really is: wood and dust and the distance between you and the river. Dad. He stood by the bed. Not Leo. The other dad. The one I am when I'm edged the wrong way. The one who will follow you into rows until I forget how to come back. He put a hand on my shoulder. It felt like my hand. It felt like a choice I'd already made. I didn't get up. I didn't put on my shoes. I didn't even turn my head. I slid my hand sideways along the sheet until it found the nightstand and the ball of twine. I held it and I kept my eyes on the far wall and said, "You can have what you've already taken. I won't give you the center." For a long time, nothing happened. Then there was the lightest pressure against my fingers, like someone tying a smaller knot on the knot I held. I swallowed and I did not look. Please don't tell me I'm wrong. I think he tied something to it. Not a note, not a message, just a knowing. A way to make my pocket heavy forever. I still see them. Not every night, but often enough that I've stopped pretending it's stress. They wait where the orchard begins and they visit my hall. And when I drive out of town past the rice co-op and the road goes flat in that way that makes the sky look like something you could fold, they walk in the bar ditches, lots of them. Not a parade, but not one either. I try not to look. I try not to unsee too. That's the trick no one tells you. You can't stare it down and you can't close your eyes. You have to live in the side of your sight and hold your blinks like you're carrying water. Leo is fine. He is fine in the measurable ways. Height chart on the doorframe, grades, the way he laughs when you don't expect him to. But sometimes he glances at the orchard and smiles at nothing. Sometimes he stands in the hallway and pats the air 2 feet to his right, the way you soothe a skittish dog. He says he doesn't remember following anyone that night. He says the shoe was always on the mat. He says he had a dream about walking between trees, and the trees were people holding still. Janelle told me if we move to a bigger town with more light, this will stop. I asked Mrs. Rivera. She looked at the fields like someone looking at a photo of their younger self and shook her head. "The shadows aren't the trees," she said. "They're the part of you that only exists when you glance at it. You carry that with you." I'm writing this because last night I felt a small hand in my palm again, as light as a moth that hasn't decided yet if you're a flower. It wasn't Leo's, it was the size of his. I did not look, I held on. I stood in the doorway between our kitchen and the dark and counted and counted and counted like a man counting laps. Like penance, like prayer. This morning the twine ball is heavier again. I haven't cut it open. I don't know what would spill out if I did. If you come to Kousa, keep your windows closed on the orchard side after dusk. Don't photograph the trees, not at night. Don't leave little gifts unless you mean it. If you take the river road, don't stare at the bar ditches. And if a shape waits where your side vision is soft, don't look. Not because it'll vanish, because it won't. Because every time you grant it the center, it learns what you love lives there. The worst part is not that I know they watch me. The worst part is that I understand it now. I am a man the orchard taught to see the way a rabbit sees, a fact the hawks must be grateful for. When Leo runs in the yard, I watch him with the corners of my eyes. He is always there. He is always there until he isn't one day if that day comes. So I hold the edges. I practice. I make the world a thing I can see without pinning it to the wall. And sometimes at night when the pump starts and the headboard hums and the house floats a little, I think about going back into the rows and not looking forever. I think maybe that's what they want. I think maybe that's what I already did, and this life is just what we see from the corner while the real one passes behind the trees. If you live here, you'll understand. If you don't, you'll think I made this up. Either way, when you turn off the light tonight and cross your dark kitchen, do yourself a favor and keep your eyes soft. You'll notice less. You'll notice more. You'll be fine. You'll be fine until you hear a small scuff in the hallway behind you, and you turn by instinct, because that is what we are built to do. And in the place where your habit points, there will be nothing. And in the space where you didn't look, there will be everything. Patient, as old and simple as a field. I'm gonna tell this in one go the way it happened, because if I stop and try to turn it into something prettier, I'll start talking myself out of the parts that don't make sense. This was 3 summers ago, in Lone Pine, California. The kind of place you pass through on your way to somewhere bigger and bluer on a postcard. I grew up 2 towns over and worked seasonal maintenance on Highway 395, patching asphalt, clearing tumbleweeds from fences, picking up the weird stuff people toss out of their cars when they finally realize the desert doesn't care about their secrets. By July, the heat rolls out of the Alabama hills like a living thing, and every storefront keeps a bowl of water out for dogs. That's the kind of place Lone Pine is, friendly in daylight, empty at night. If you've driven through, you probably noticed the old elementary school right off the main drag, tucked behind some cottonwoods that haven't decided whether to keep living or not. It's a low single-story brick building with a flat roof and a sidewalk buckled by roots. The district closed it in the late 80s after they opened the new school down the road. More windows, better heating, fewer asbestos jokes. It's been chained ever since. People break in anyway. The windows are boarded, but the boards have been pried back and nailed again so many times that they look like ribs around a chest that refuses to stay dead. There are the usual stories. The janitor who stuck around after they laid him off. The teacher who never married, who knew every kid's birthday by heart and then didn't get one of her own. The usual, but the story everyone repeats is simple. Some nights, if you park under the cottonwoods and kill your lights, you'll see the classroom lamps come on, just the soft, yellow rectangles like aquariums in the dark. And if you go in, you'll hear the bell. I didn't believe any of that. I'd already been inside once, years before, with a girl I thought I loved because she wore a denim jacket with a skull patch and called her car the hearse. We got in through a back door where the chain had been cut, and all we found were tilting bookshelves and the powdered smell of chalk. We took a selfie next to the bulletin board where construction paper leaves still listed what I'm thankful for in a dozen tidy kid hands. My dog, my mom, my dad coming home soon. We laughed about how every town tries to keep its ghost busy, so when my younger cousin Eli rolled back from his first year of community college and wanted to start making urban exploration videos, the school was an obvious pick. Eli's friend Kira was with him, the one everyone described as the kid who would sit on a train rail just to feel it hum. She had a shaved head from a bet, a thrifted camera strapped to a chest rig, and about 3 times more energy than I'd had at 19. They begged me to come. I told them I had work early. Then I didn't sleep that night and texted them at midnight. Fine, but we do it quick. We don't vandalize, and if a raccoon jumps out at us, you can't upload me screaming. We met at the gas station with the fake black bear mounted over the candy aisle. The attendant looked up as I paid for a 6-pack of water and a bag of jerky. "You kids staying out of the school tonight?" he asked, which was weird because I hadn't said where we were going. I told him we were just getting snacks. He looked at our flashlights. "Well, light's been funny on that side of town. Don't stand under them trees if the wind picks up. It was one of those hot nights that fake you out. The air felt skin cool, but when you breathed, you got the taste of warm brick and dry grass and someone else's dust. Crickets were the only sound. We parked a block away and walked in on foot out of habit. The cottonwoods hung their tired branches over the cracked sidewalk, and there was the school as plain and ordinary as a waiting room. The chain on the door was new. That annoyed me. I was supposed to be the adult here, and now I'd led the kids to a locked door. "Wait," Eli said. He jogged around to the side while Kira swung her camera up to show our disappointment. "Tell the people how it feels to be thwarted," she said, turning the lens on me. I covered it with my hand. "It feels like you're going home before I have to carry you if you roll an ankle." "That's what it feels like," Eli hissed. "Got it?" And we followed the sound. One of the bathroom windows in the rear, the little louvered kind that tilt open, had been cracked. Someone had taped plastic over it, then cut the tape again. He'd already wriggled in up to his hips, and I had to grab his belt to stop him from falling onto God knew what. I squeezed through after him, trying not to think about sharp ceramic or old syringes. Kira came last, muttering, "If I drop my camera, I'm going to haunt you." We hit the floor in a narrow hallway that smelled like damp paper towels and copper. Our flashlights punched white holes into bulletin boards listing fire safety tips, and a faded calendar with September '88 halfway crossed out. Someone had drawn a smiley face next to the days. The doors to either side were propped open with textbooks turned to math problems about trains meeting each other at impossible speeds. The rooms were the same as always, chairs stacked, a globe peeled down to gray paper, textbooks splayed like dead birds. "Wait," Kira said. Her voice had stopped sounding like a joke. "Do you hear that?" At first I said no. Then I thought I heard a clock. The normal tick you don't notice until you realize you're alone with it. But this one was off. It was too even, too slow. Not a wall clock. Something mechanical. I was about to tell them it was probably a swamp cooler working itself to death when it stopped. And something else slid into the exact space it left, like a song switching tracks on the same rhythm. It was a child clearing their throat. I know how that sounds. Eli's breath stuttered. Kira lifted the camera and whispered, "Holy, did you get that?" "Quiet," I hissed. And it wasn't because I was trying to listen better. It was because suddenly I knew we were somewhere that wanted to hear us back. We crept toward the sound, past a door stenciled principal in peeling gold letters. A corridor branched off to the right and took us to a row of classrooms with windows looking out at the cottonwoods. The glass black and faintly reflective, like someone had turned the night into a mirror and pressed it up against the panes. The first classroom we looked into was a mess, as expected. The second made me forget what I'd been expecting at all. There was chalk on the blackboard. Fresh chalk. You know the difference if you've ever written on one. Old chalk leaves a ghost of itself and drags. Fresh chalk sings. There were clean lines, straight verticals, a teacher's careful hand. Monday attendance. Reading, cloudy with a chance of meatballs. Peter's here 12:19. Writing, what I will be when I grow up. Rough drafts due Friday. Math, double-digit subtraction. Show your work.
Science seeds, what do they need?
The date in the corner said September 12th, 1988. Underneath, in a smaller hand, circled twice, practice drill at 10:15 a.m. Do not hide in the restrooms. The desks, those tan laminated tops with the cubbies underneath, weren't stacked. They were arranged in rows facing the board, and in them, resting inside the cubbies or set neatly on the desktops, were what looked like lunch boxes and pencil cases and homework folders. All so clean they didn't match the room around them. There was a folded sweater on one chair back with a name in Sharpie on the collar. Chelsea R.I. stepped into the doorway before I meant to. My light jittered across the objects and froze on a set of crayons fat with newness, their paper wrappers unpeeled. Eli stood next to me, breathing too fast. Kira's camera was aimed dead center at the board, its little red light on. The sensation I got was stupid and undeniable, that we were late and someone was going to be annoyed. "You're recording?" I whispered. Kira nodded without looking at me. This is, she didn't finish. Her camera's display screen cast a low glow that made her face look like a kid telling a ghost story with a flashlight under her chin. "Do we touch anything?" Eli asked. "No," I said. "We leave. We get a cop." "What cop?" He was right. Lone Pine at that hour didn't have a patrol car you could whistle up in 5 minutes. It would be the county sheriff out of Independence, and by the time they made it down, the chalk would be dry again and the forgetful part of my brain would have triumphed. You saw a room like you wanted to see it? Then, as if to punish the thought, the overhead lights came on. Not all at once. That would have been dramatic. No, one bank of fluorescence flicked, hummed to life. Then the other. After a few stubborn tries like old men getting out of lawn chairs, we didn't turn them on. We were 15 feet away from the nearest switch, and even if we'd tried, the breakers for a place like this should have been off for decades. The room was no longer a shadow box. It was a classroom. Dust rose in the light like shaken glitter. The flat clock above the door showed 9:50 and the second hand ticked. I swear to you, it ticked. Okay, I said, but my voice was not the boss of my legs anymore. I walked in. I looked at the board again, at the tidy loops of the teacher's R's, the way she dotted her I's like she was trying to make each one a little different so she wouldn't get bored. Hello? I said. Is anyone here? That's when I noticed the desks. They weren't just set with things. They were full. At first, my brain decided they were mannequins. After all, we've all seen that in Halloween stores. Plastic faces tilted in polite attention. But these weren't plastic. They weren't complete either. Where you expect a whole child, there were clean t-shirts stretched over shoulders, skinny elbows and faded sleeves, hair parted with a careful hand, but if you looked for eyes, there was something like frost on glass. If you looked for mouths, you saw lips that didn't remember what they were for. And yet, if you didn't look too hard, they were just kids. The top of a head moving as someone breathed, the small operation of a jaw chewing gum in secret, the drumming of fingertips on laminated wood. Things you don't see, you hear. Don't, Eli said, and I realized my hand had reached for the closest desk like I meant to shake it. I stepped back. Good morning, a voice said, flat as the intercom announcements at a supermarket. We spun. The voice came from the ceiling speaker over the door, a little metal grill dotted with paint. It crackled. Good morning, it said again, cheerier. Please be in your seats when the bell rings. I looked for a motion sensor, a Bluetooth speaker, anything. Kira's mouth had opened and didn't know how to close. She was finally filming, but her hands weren't steady now. Hello? I said, hearing how I'd already answered it like a person. We're just passing through. Please be in your seats when the bell rings, the speaker repeated. A tone like honey poured over cardboard. Do not sit, I hissed. The clock's hand jerked. The tick was normal again. At 9:55, something changed. The hot night outside tilted cooler, or the opposite. I don't know. The cottonwoods pressed their leaves against the glass like they wanted a better view. The overhead lighting took on the greenish color of an aquarium light, and the dust in it moved faster. There was a faint scuffing from the hallway. A shoe dragging, a walker, a teacher with sensible heels, and then the bell rang. Not loud, not the sharp clang I remember from my own school, but a muted version like you'd hear if someone rang a bell in the next room over and closed the door. Kids, whatever was in those chairs, sat up a little. Straighter. Attendants, the voice said. It began to read names. Every one of them with the brisk kindness adults use when they settle a room. Allison B. A small papery sound like a hand being raised. Here. Brian T. Here. The H's and M's and S's, the doubled names, the way a teacher pauses on a complicated last name, and the child rescues them with, you can just call me. I couldn't tell if the voice belonged to a man or a woman. I couldn't tell if it belonged anywhere. It was habits strung together, tones that mean it's time to listen. It reached Eli, and my cousin made an involuntary noise like a laugh broken in half. Common name, I said quickly, but my mouth had gone so dry that the words made more sound scraping my teeth than they did in the air. It read Kira, too. She stumbled backward into one of the desks and apologized to it. She apologized to a desk. The small body in it did not turn its head. It never read my name. It read Chelsea R., and I stepped toward the sweater. The intercom said, present, in a child's chirp that didn't match the other voice at all. I don't know what would have happened if we'd let it finish. Maybe it would have started reading. Maybe it would have told the kids to take out their math. Maybe it would have asked us for the permission slips we didn't have. But Eli had been whispering and whispering and whispering, dude. And suddenly he wasn't whispering. He was pulling my sleeve with a jerk strong enough to mean we were already leaving. He pointed. One of the lunches, a metal lunchbox with a space shuttle on it, shiny as a thumbnail, had fogged on the inside of its lid. Like there was breath in there, we left. The hallway breathed warm around us. Behind us, the attendants continued, and then, as if someone had accidentally hit the wrong button, the intercom voice asked in the same bright tone, "Does anyone need to use the restroom before we begin?" I heard 2 or 3 chairs scrape very softly and then stop. I didn't look back. I took us down the main corridor toward the bathroom window we'd squeezed through. That's when we saw him, or the idea of him. At the end of the hall, next to a display case filled with yellowing photos of kids wearing paper crowns, a man stood with a garbage can and a dustpan. He wore that janitor's green that you only see in cartoons anymore. He had the posture you get from pushing a broom for years, shoulders rounded, proud of a thing no one thanks you for. He didn't have a face either, not at first. It was exactly like when you walk into a bright room from the dark and can't make out features. Except we were walking into the dark, and he was the only thing that had light on it. His head turned toward us. There was no malice in that. Just the fundamental problem of recognition. "Sir," I said, because my mouth needed something to do that sounded respectful. We came in through the window. We're leaving. I'm sorry. We didn't break anything." For a long moment, the man didn't move. Then he looked down at the dustpan in his hand as if he'd been interrupted mid-sweep and was irritated by that. He bent, and the sound the pan made against the floor was dry and brittle and perfect. The sound of a pan that has lived a life. He lifted it, the angle wrong for the weight it should have, and set it back with exact care. He did not speak. But as he lifted his head, I saw his mouth, and it was someone's father's mouth. The kind that looks kinder when you don't know the stories behind it. "Please," I said, and hated the trembling that made it sound like begging. "Please," he raised his free hand, not to threaten, not to point, just to indicate the sign next to him as a hotel concierge might. No students beyond this point without a hall pass. Kira did something then that I'm still not sure wasn't the right thing. She said, "We'll go get one," and took Eli's sleeve and walked past him like she belonged there. He didn't move to stop us. He turned his head to watch like he was making sure we didn't try for the trophy case. We made it to the bathroom. The window was where we left it. A ragged mouth opened to the cottonwoods. Eli went first. I boosted him. He disappeared. I shoved Kira up and out, her camera banging my shoulder hard enough to bruise. I put one knee on the sink to hoist myself and felt the porcelain crack under my weight like ice. The noise was too loud in that dead building. The intercom in the hall announced cheerfully, "Drill class. Please proceed to your safe places. Do not hide in the restrooms." My whole body went cold. Something about the metal in that speaker flattened every syllable and made the words heavy. "Do not hide in the restrooms." Like someone had written that sentence 100 times after the fact, because once upon a time, kids had done exactly that and it hadn't helped. I shoved my shoulders at the window and got stuck for a second on the louvered frame. The plastic sheeting crackled against my ear. For one nauseous moment, I felt fingers around my ankle. Not gripping, not even terribly strong, just asking. Then Kira and Eli each grabbed an arm and pulled me out into the cottonwood air. We ran. The kind of run you do when you don't want to look behind you because you know how stories work. And you know the thing will be there if you give it the respect of your attention. We didn't speak until we reached the car. Kira fumbled the camera onto the seat like it had started to burn her. Eli was laughing now, the kind of laugh people use as a life raft. I told him to shut up because it made something inside my chest want to cry. We drove to the gas station. The black bear stared down at us like it knew about the soft parts behind our ribs. The attendant didn't look surprised to see us. He slid a paper cup across the counter and said, "Water's free." I chugged it and wiped my mouth and said, "Do you know anything about that school?" Which was the smallest question for the biggest thing. He scratched his jaw. "I know we used to do the earthquake drills different back then," he said. "Before Loma Prieta, before Northridge. I know we used to tell the kids to get under the desks and hold on. Now they do it different. Times change, except when they don't." He folded a lottery scan and smoothed it out again. "Lights come on sometimes when it's hot, or when the wind goes down all at once, or when there's thunder a couple counties away. Air does funny things in the valley. My brother says it's static. He also says his dog talks to him about baseball, so you know." "What happened there?" Kira asked. Her voice was too high. The attendant glanced at her camera and then at me like I should vet the question. I wasn't anyone's authority. He shrugged. They had a fire once, he said. Not in the building. In the hills. Smoke came down like the end of days. They sent them all home early with orange handkerchiefs on their faces. No one died, if that's what you're asking. Bad stories don't need bodies. They just need people. He pushed the cup toward me again. You should get some sleep. Don't get yourself hurt acting like a movie. We didn't upload the footage. Not right away. We went to my place and tried to watch it, and the file would play in these 6-second bursts before freezing, each time on a frame that looked less like a classroom and more like a composite of 100 classrooms. There were pages fluttering that I didn't remember. There was a stuffed bear slumped against a bookshelf with its fur turned the wrong way. In one freeze, a pencil had rolled toward the camera and stopped with its eraser touching the lens. We slept badly in the same room like kids at a sleepover who've watched the wrong thing. Every time a truck rolled down 395, someone jerked awake. At 10:15 a.m. the following morning, my phone alarm went off because I'd set it years ago to remind me when to take a break on long workdays. And for one solid breath, I braced for the intercom. Life goes on. You get up. You go to work. You don't talk about it because you don't want it to think you're still thinking about it. Eli went back to school in the fall. Kira cut together an unrelated video about a water park they'd broken into in Victorville and got 20,000 views. I told myself we'd imagined the parts that didn't fit and exaggerated the parts that did. 2 weeks later, I found chalk under my nails. My job doesn't involve chalk. I don't own any chalk. It was the fine, squeaky kind you only get on the pads of your fingers. And I didn't notice it until I ran my hand under the tap, and the water went cloudy in thin white lines. I stood there watching it curl down the drain and thought, okay, that's a coincidence. That same day, a kid's voice in the grocery store behind me said, "Excuse me, I'm here." And my spine did something it shouldn't do, and I knocked over a display of canned tomatoes. The kid apologized like it was his fault, and then blinked past me with the blank politeness of children who are being watched too closely. I started waking up at 6:40 a.m., which was when my old elementary school started in a different county. With a bell so loud it rattled the air, I started paying attention to the lists at the end of articles. What to pack in an emergency kit. How to talk to kids about crisis. I bought a whistle. It felt like a stupid object until it was in my hand at a stoplight, and I thought, if I blow this, who listens? The thing that made me admit out loud that the school had followed me came a month later, when Kira and I stopped by the new elementary to drop off some used books. They were doing an open house. Kids tugging their parents down hallways, construction paper suns taped everywhere. We were passing one of those boards when Kira grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "Don't," she said. "What?" But she was staring at the list. It said what I will be when I grow up, and under it, in fresh marker and that alert teacher handwriting that makes everything look like an instruction, were answers from the kids. Marine biologist, chef, vet, YouTuber, dad. At the bottom was a name in the corner, Chelsea R. The R was circled twice and pressed hard into the paper, like whoever wrote it had gone over it, and over it, and over it until the paper said, okay, I give. That night I drove back to the old school by myself with a hammer because I am sometimes that kind of idiot. The kind that thinks stories will behave if you enter them with force and light. The chain on the door was still new. The cottonwoods were trying to give themselves up to fall but didn't know how. I parked under them and I did the thing everyone says to do. I killed my lights. I waited. The windows did not immediately glow. The crickets did their sound. A dog barked somewhere that had not learned any of this was for it. 30 minutes passed. 40. I told myself I was a fool and would be home at midnight, and I reached for my keys. The lights came on one bank at a time and then the other. The hammer felt dumb in my hand. I left it on the passenger seat. I walked to the door. I didn't go around back. I stood at the front like a person who knows where to line up. And I said, in a voice that belonged to my 4th grade teacher or my mother or someone I trusted then, "I'm here for pickup." It's possible you think that's the point where the teacher comes out and gives me a child made of dust. It isn't. The building hummed like tired insects. The intercom crackled and then said, "Car rider line is at the side entrance," and for 1 second I was so relieved that I laughed, because what is more perfectly school than being told you're in the wrong place and having it said nicely? I didn't go to the side. I went home. I'd like to say that was brave or wise, but it was neither. It was the lack of a next step. Sometimes, once in a while, the chalk is back under my nails. Sometimes I hear the tick of a clock in a room with no clocks. Once I woke at 10:15 a.m. exactly to the neighbor mowing his lawn and was sure it was a drill and hid in the bathroom by accident and felt so stupid standing there that I got angry at myself the rest of the day. As if anger could rearrange the wires in me. Eli won't talk about it. If I say the school, he says which one. And that's the end. Kira sold her camera and started taking photos of birds at dawn, which sounds like a perfect opposite, until you think about how birds congregate on telephone lines like notes on a staff and make a music you can't hear until they stop. I've driven by at night and seen other cars parked under the cottonwoods. Teenagers mostly. People on a first date who want to dare something together. Their faces are lit by their phones as they read the same paragraph from the same blog post written 10 years ago by a guy who says he saw a light, and then a man with a mop, and then nothing else. I want to walk up to their windows and knock and tell them they don't need to go inside. That this town already has all the stories it can handle. If you do go, don't sit when they tell you to. Don't answer when they call your name. If they ask if anyone needs the restroom, say no and keep saying it. You think the worst thing would be to get stuck in there, but that's not true. The worst thing is that you'll be let out, and you'll carry something so ordinary that you'll never convince anyone it's wrong. You'll find yourself buying a pack of pencils to keep in a glass by your door. You'll plan routes that take you past schools and pretend it's faster. And if the intercom ever asks you to line up and hold hands, do not. Not because it's sinister, though it is, but because what it wants most is for you to obey the habit of it. That's the part that stays, the habit. The bell, the name, the chair that fits you too well. The promise that if you're very quiet and do exactly what you're told, you won't have to find out what's behind the door labeled principal. When I pass Lone Pine now, I keep my windows up even if the air is better with them down. I don't look at the cottonwoods. I don't look at the low brick building or the cords of shadow where the windows are. But without looking, I know whether the lights are on. Sometimes, for no reason I can figure they are. Sometimes they aren't. And sometimes, like on a hot night that turns cool on an inhale, like on an anniversary you don't remember until your body does, they flicker in a kind of rhythm that makes you want to find your seat. Fold your hands and wait to be told what to do. If you ever see them, and if the speaker clears its throat and the voice says, "Good morning," the way voices always do at the beginning of things, tell it you're just passing through. Then keep going. Don't slow down for the crosswalk. Don't read the chalk. Don't check the door to see if it's unlocked. And if you find chalk on your fingers later, wash it off. Wash it off and keep your hands busy until you forget how clean it made them feel. The locals say Ferndale looks like a postcard somebody forgot to update. That's what the brochures say too. Ornate Victorian storefronts, a main street with hanging baskets, white picket fences, a candy shop that sells taffy and wax paper. My wife Anna found us a bed and breakfast there because it was halfway between the redwoods we wanted to hike and the coastal drives I kept promising to do. We booked it for 3 nights, early fall shoulder season. I remember thinking the place looked safe the way a photograph looks safe. Bright, framed, no context. We got there on a Wednesday. I was the driver. Anna navigated. The last stretch of highway took us through fog that was low and weirdly even, like the world had been lowered under a ceiling. Ferndale sits in a bowl between hills. By the time we rolled down into town, it felt like we were dropping into something pressed flat and quiet. The bed and breakfast, the Rose Finch house, was off the main drag, on an elbow of street that dead-ended into a little cemetery with iron fencing. A woman named Mabel ran the place. She had gray hair piled up in a way that looked practical, a heavy sweater even though it wasn't cold, and a voice that made you want to lower yours when you talked to her. "Before you settle in," she said, handing us a real brass key, "there's one thing. At night, if you hear anything humming, don't go to the windows, don't step onto the porch, and don't try to follow it. Shut your eyes, put a pillow over your head, think of something boring. It passes." Anna laughed, because this is the exact kind of line people say in towns that survive on charm. I smiled because I thought we'd been targeted for the tourist treatment. Mabel didn't smile. "It's nothing to worry about," she added, and moved on to where the granola was and the tea. Her hands were a little shaky when she showed me the cabinet with extra blankets. Only later did I notice the heavy blackout curtains and the thick draft stoppers tucked along the windowsills. At the moment, we were just glad to set our bags down. breathe, and scroll through our phones to let everybody know we'd arrived. We walked through town before dusk. There were maybe 15 people out counting us, 2 teenagers on skateboards, a guy with a dog that looked like it had been put together from spare parts, a red-haired woman wiping down the glass of the pharmacy. You know how some small places sound? Where you hear your own shoes? That was Ferndale. It had that hollow afternoon quiet where it's unclear if people are resting or gone. We had dinner at a place called the Creamery. The waiter asked where we were from, and we told him the Bay Area. He asked about the drive like he genuinely cared how the asphalt had treated us. Midway through, an older couple came in, and the waiter knew their names in their usual order.
He knew the dog's name too.
We're not city snobs. We like that kind of thing. If anything, it embedded us deeper into what we'd come for. 3 nights of pretending we could belong somewhere simple. On the walk back, the fog was funneling in off the fields. It didn't roll. It arrived. It made the streetlights look like lamps underwater. At the gate to the cemetery, there's a sign with an old black and white photo of the town in the 1890s. Horses, mud, the same angled rooftops. I remember we stood there longer than made sense. The past was right there with the present, just a flipbook difference between the two. We went inside to our room with the quilt, the framed flower drawings, a faint smell of lavender, and something else. Basement damp wood. Mabel had placed a plate of cookies on the dresser. We joked that she was leaning hard into the aesthetic. The humming started a little after 10. It wasn't a noise you could point to like a car alarm or a plane overhead. It was layered. The first thing my brain said was bees. Thousands of bees inside a wall, but it wasn't sharp. It wasn't vibrating a single point. It seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, like a refrigerator hum if every object in the room had decided to do it at once. Anna and I looked up at the same time. "Is that?" She started. "Yeah," I said. And because I am me, I got up and went to the window. Anna grabbed my wrist. She said not to. I said without thinking. That was just a bit. But the way my voice came out, I heard I didn't believe myself. The hum rose and fell like breath. I hesitated with my fingers on the curtain. The sound had a shape. I know that makes no sense, but it did. It came closer and receded, not like a single mass, but like a crowd. My name was in it, not clearly, not like a whisper right at your ear, but in the same way you can hear your name across a room at a party, not because it's loud, but because your brain is trained to catch it. My name threaded through the humming. My whole body went tight, some animal reflex in my spine. Anna must have felt it too. She pulled me back onto the bed. "Don't," she said. "For once in your life, just don't." We lay there listening, and the sound filled the room without making a single thing vibrate. It had mass without weight. My head tried to guess sources. Wind through something, low-tuned power lines, a sea cave doing bumper car with the air. Something perfectly natural, surely. Something we could Google in the morning and laugh about. It lasted 20 minutes, then faded like it had made a decision and moved on. We didn't say much after. It's like when a stranger smiles at you on the subway for just one moment too long. You don't talk about it because speaking would allow the strangeness into the room. We turned on a podcast and let 2 people we'd never met talk us to sleep. In the morning, things were too bright. That's not poetic. The sun was genuinely too strong through the lace edges of the curtains. The tea tasted overly floral. The bacon looked like a photograph of bacon. I was in a mood but didn't know why. Like I'd had a fight in a dream and brought the anger back with me. Anna said she felt heavy, like she'd run a race in her sleep. We laughed about sleeping in a bed that countless strangers had slept in before us and moved on. We walked to a cafe on Main Street, a place with chalkboard menus and an upright piano nobody played. The barista was a guy in his 20s with hair that aimed for messy and landed on careful. He asked us how our first night was. Before either of us could answer, he said, "You didn't listen, right?" "Listen to what?" Anna asked, buying time. He smirked like he knew better than to push it in front of the regulars. "Tourist trap," he said, leaning on the espresso machine. "They always do that to newbies. Don't let them spook you. Welcome to Ferndale." He wrote welcome in caramel on a latte and slid it across to me. When I looked back up, I swear he was waiting for me to say my name without being asked. I know that's nothing, but it was specific. I felt a prickling heat in my face, then told myself I was projecting. We spent the day driving the Avenue of the Giants and hiking among trees so big that your brain rewrites how it understands size. We ate sandwiches on a log the length of a house and watched a bird hop like it had all the time in the world. The day fixed us. The hum felt like a dumb story the town tells, and we'd let it under our skin. On the way back, though, the fog took us again. A little earlier than before, like it had learned our timing. Back at the Rose Finch, Mabel had left a note on our door. "Let me know if you want extra earplugs tonight." There was a smiley face. It was the first time we'd seen her handwriting. It looked young. Not in the way that's neat and rounded, but the way you write before your letters get tired. I knocked on her office door to joke with her about the concierge service. She opened, smiled that thin smile, and handed me a little blue case like the ones you get on airplanes. "People say they help," she said. "Sometimes people like to listen and then it stays with them." The sound. Like a song you don't like but can't stop humming. "Where's it coming from?" I asked, expecting a story about the dairy factory or the tide or pipes. She looked at my shirt instead of my face. "Places like ours don't get to keep things," she said. "Not people either." That night the humming started earlier, closer to 9, like it had been waiting for us. With the earplugs in, it was worse. You know how when you plug your ears you can hear your own blood? The hum slipped into that private place and felt internal. I took them out and put the pillow over my head like Mabel said. That helped more, which annoyed me. Anna laughed at me, half choking on a pillow, and then got quiet and did the same thing. In between waves of noise, sleep came in shards. I dreamed I'd left my phone somewhere, and every time I went back to look for it, the place I'd been changed. The cafe became a hardware store. The cemetery gate was suddenly a bridge. When I woke, Anna was sitting up staring at the wall. She didn't look scared. She looked attentive, like a student. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to hear the words she said. "What words?" Her face crumpled into something like embarrassment. And for a second I saw the little kid I'd never known who used to get caught singing to herself. "I think they're saying stuff," she said. "Not like English, but of families. Lists. The sound is laid out in lines. If you listen long enough, it lines up." "That's when you're supposed to stop listening," I said. "Maybe it's just wind anyway," she said, and lay back down and put the pillow over her face without any more teasing. The next morning, I forgot my email password. Again, that's nothing. But I'm the one who remembers our passwords. Our propane bill date, the sizes of our niece's shoes. Forgetting the email felt like stepping on a stair I was sure was there and finding air. I spent 20 minutes clicking reset, and it was like none of the recovery questions were mine. "Where did you meet your spouse?" I typed Berkeley, then deleted it. I typed Oakland, then stared at it like I'd written in a language I didn't know. It was low-grade panic that I hid under jokes. I met Anna in a shared office kitchen 3 jobs ago. We'd fought about whose lunch leaked. This is not the kind of memory you lose. It's architecture. We walked to the cemetery. The fog had burned off early, which made the iron fence throw hard shadows that reminded me of piano keys. The names on the gravestones were the same as the names on the storefronts. That's not a metaphor. Carter, Blake, Nilsson, March. The dates were older than I'd expected, but that makes sense in a town like this. The thing that didn't make sense were the stones with no first names. Just mother, brother, daughter. It felt like the ground could call you back with a word. We were about to leave when a man walked up the path swinging a ring of keys. He was sheriff or security, or maybe just a guy who liked to pretend he was in charge of things. He was mid-50s, soft in a way that came from good breakfasts, wearing a badge that you could probably buy online but also probably meant something here. He nodded. "You folks enjoying your stay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "It's beautiful." "Quiet too," he said, looking out over the stones like he was about to give a speech. "We like our quiet." He could have been warning us. He could have been making small talk. It sat in the space between. "Although," he added, "I always say tourists who sleep with their windows open deserve what they get." He laughed, a deep sound that didn't reach his eyes. "You folks' name?" he asked like he'd forgotten to be polite. Anna told him our first names. He nodded like that was enough, then tapped one of the posts with his knuckle and walked away, whistling under his breath. The tune was nothing. But then I found myself humming it 3 hours later over my sandwich, and I couldn't have told you how it went to save my life. It was like the sound of his mouth had moved into my throat. Back at the Rose Finch, I asked Mabel straight out what the deal was. Not aggressive, but direct. "This town used to be bigger," she said. "Back when the mills were all going, when the marsh hadn't decided to take back land." I said, "Okay." "We had people," she said. She placed a little book on the counter. It was a ledger, with names written in tight, careful columns, the ink brown and sunned. Rooms at the Finch since my grandmother's time. She flipped through pages like a math teacher checking work. 1951, 1962, 1977, 1993, 2008. You know what I'm going to say. Some of the names were crossed out, not with a single line. The entire entry had been X'd over again and again until it tore the paper. Some had little notes. "Moved to Third Saint," "helps at hardware," "milk route." Others said nothing. They were just erased without being erased. "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling stupid for asking the obvious wrong question. "Some people stayed," she said. "Stayed at the bed and breakfast?" "In Ferndale," she said. "Some people decide they're from here." Anna laughed. "It wasn't entirely friendly." "Decide," she said. "Like a hobby?" "It's not a decision like you think," Mabel said. She closed the book, then opened it again, then closed it again. "You know how at night, when you think about yourself, you sort of hold on to your own shape? The sound loosens that. The town holds a shape too. If you listen too closely, you learn the town's shape before you hold on to your own. It happens." "This is the worst sales pitch I've ever heard," I said. She smiled and looked tired even with the smile. "You'll be gone in 2 days," she said. "You'll talk about the trees. If anyone asks, you'll say Ferndale is lovely. That is what happens when people keep their pillows over their heads." We went upstairs. We didn't talk. Talking is a kind of commitment. You say something aloud and you make it real. We watched a show to fill the space. Anna kept scrolling through photos on her phone and then backing out without liking or saving any. That's the first time I noticed the pictures from the first day didn't look like I remembered. We'd taken a selfie by the cemetery gate. In the photo, the gate was there, the fence, the shadowed stones. But past us, the buildings on Main Street looked wrong, off by inches, slightly different angles. The N in pharmacy was backwards. I told myself the lens had a wide-angle warp. The third night, the humming came before the sun fully set. It wasn't patient anymore. It had moved from weather to schedule. Other people heard it too, through the walls. The couples down the hall shuffled. Somebody coughed, somebody said, "It's early," and someone else shushed them like they were in a church. I tried not to listen. I tried for the pillow, for putting my head under the blanket like a kid. But the sound was not just sound anymore. It had insinuated itself into the way my thoughts began. Every sentence started with the hum. When I focused on not listening, I realized I was actually focusing on the edges, the seams where the sound became silence. It's like rolling your tongue to find a missing tooth you didn't know you were missing. The hum changed. There were breaks in it, quick drops where for half a second I could hear footfalls outside, or a light rattle of a bicycle somewhere, or the brewery door across the way thump open and closed. In those breaks, if I didn't think any words in my own mind, I could almost make out the pattern Anna had talked about. Lines. Names, place names first, I think. Matole, Fernbridge, Roner. Then surnames, the ones on the gravestones but not attached to the old dates. They were connected to jobs. Nielsen, post. Carter, oil delivery. March, linen. The sound was a register recited by 1,000 mouths through cloth. At some point I realized Anna wasn't beside me. It was sudden, that realization, like being shaken. I thought she was in the bathroom. I whispered her name. No answer. The hum ran through my name like a bead on a string. I stood up. I told myself I was an idiot as I moved the curtain a fraction with 2 fingers. I told myself I was just checking. The fog had erased the world beyond the porch, but the porch was there. The wooden planks and the wicker chair with a plaid blanket draped over it like someone had just stood up. I opened the door. I don't remember deciding to do it. The humidity was immediate, a heavy hand on the mouth. I stepped out and the fog felt, this is going to sound like I'm trying too hard, thick with sound. It wasn't just buzzing. It was simmering speech without consonants, breaths trying to become words and stopping right before. Across the street, shapes moved. Figures, but not in the way people move when they walk to somewhere. They had a drifting motion, like a tension without bodies, swaying in unison toward the center of town. I saw the sheriff's outline, or a shape that my brain told me was him because of the way it held its shoulders. I saw the barista's hat. I saw Mabel, or someone who could be Mabel, holding a lantern that pushed a yellow bubble into the gray. And then I saw Anna. She wasn't in her coat. She wasn't even in shoes. She was walking with the others. Her face tilted slightly as if listening harder might make it kinder. I said her name out loud this time, and the fog ate the sound the way the ocean takes a stone. She didn't pause. I went down the steps. The hum filled everything and made movement feel like I was waiting. "Anna!" I yelled louder. This time a few heads turned, and not toward me. They turned toward each other. That's when I realized the hum had changed the rules of attention. I wasn't on its map. I followed because there was no version of me that wouldn't. We went toward Maine. People came out of houses that I thought were empty. They came down from porches and stepped out of doorways and gathered in the middle of the street, like the town had poured itself into one place. The hum moved around us in strands. It's going to sound like I'm lying now, but I heard my mother singing when I was 7, misremembered and looped. I heard my old boss clearing his throat before a cruel joke. I heard the little coo our neighbor's baby made when it saw the ceiling fan. Rooms I'd been in, people I knew by name, their noises braided in the hum until I couldn't be sure which belonged to me and which belonged to the town. "Don't go," I said. Right behind Anna now, close enough to touch her wrist. She didn't startle. She turned slowly, like a hinge that needed oil, and she smiled in a polite, distant way that wrecked me. It was the smile you save for strangers who want directions. "Do I know you?" she asked. Every story makes you think you'll have the right thing to say in that moment. There was nothing. I took her wrist. Her skin was cool, not in a scary way, in a fog on the skin way, like a fruit from the fridge. The hum dipped. For a second, I felt the silence so hard it hurt. Then it rose again and swelled so close that my eyes watered. "You're Anna," I said like an idiot. "We live in..." I paused. "We live in..." The rest of the sentence dropped out of my mouth and fell to the street where I couldn't find it. It skittered away like a bug. I could see the outline of our place, the crooked bookshelf, the crack in the bathroom tile shaped like Nevada, but I couldn't grab the address. I couldn't grab the city. I couldn't grab the names of the roads that led to it. "What's your name?" she asked, kind, like she'd help me if I said the right thing. I said my name. I said it twice. I said it to her and then to the fog. The hum ran the syllables back to me like it was checking my math. The faces around us turned, slightly, toward the sound. Toward me. Not in judgment, not in welcome, but like you'd turn toward a new noise in your house. The sheriff shape stepped closer. The barista. Mabel brought the lantern. Up close, her face looked like it does when she's freshening tea. Tired. Caring in a way that costs. "Don't pull her," Mabel said, quiet. "You'll tangle it. You'll both be pulled clean." "This is my wife," I said. "We're..." The word we felt too large, like I was trying to lift something that wasn't mine. "Maybe," Mabel said, and the lantern light wavered like her hand wasn't steady. "Maybe you listen too. Then you can walk together." The sheriff shape cleared his throat. It was the same tone he'd whistled, the same pattern. The hum around us rearranged as if he'd given it a signal. I felt it pull at my chest. I felt familiar noises lift up, unhooking and move toward the center where the town had gathered. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. The screen lit my hand like a little drowning face. I saw the wallpaper photo. Us on a ferry last summer, wind tangling Anna's hair, my head ducked. But the US in the photo, our faces were a little wrong. Or the wrongness was me. That thought was the first one that felt like mine in a while. I did the only stupid thing left. I ran, I know. I should have dragged her. I should have fought a town. But running felt like the only way to remind my legs they were connected to me. I cut left down a side street where a chain-link fence glittered with damp. The hum followed, but thinner, puzzled. My lungs burned. I don't think I've run that hard since high school. Behind me, shoes on wet pavement. The not organized, too even rhythm of a group that doesn't feel the need to hurry. Ferndale is a bowl. That helps. Up is up, I went up. The fog thinned at the edge like it was less brave there. The humming was softer. The names in it got fuzzier, like someone had thrown a blanket over the speaker. I didn't stop until I was past the cemetery and onto the road that leads to 2111. The hum didn't disappear. It sat at my back like a weather system. My legs shook so bad that I had to put my hands on my knees and count breaths like a kid hiding in a closet. I didn't go back to the Rosefinch that night. That sentence feels like a coward wrote it. I slept or not slept in the car, pulled over on a turnout where a cow stared at me like it knew me. The hum came in waves around 3 a.m., then faded toward morning like it had gotten what it wanted. The sky did that thing it does up there where it gets bright and you realize you weren't in darkness so much as under a lid. I drove into town when the bakery opened. I half expected to find no town. Instead, I found more of the town than before. There were new hand-lettered signs on the buildings, or maybe I just saw them. There was a woman sweeping her stoop whose face I recognized without knowing her. The barista was working and didn't look up when I walked in. He didn't do the welcome script. He didn't even smirk. He slid a coffee to a man I swear I'd seen the day before, wearing a tourist hat and now wearing work boots and a shirt with a name, patch that said Brian. The sheriff nodded at me through the window without a smile. Mabel stood behind the bakery counter, not the B&B front desk, slicing a cinnamon roll and saying gently, "Fresh today," to someone whose back looked exactly like mine. Anna wasn't there. I walked to the Rose Finch house like maybe it would be a magic trick. Like opening that door would put everything back. The key didn't fit. The plaque by the door didn't say Rose Finch anymore. It said N. Carter Rooms. My phone, which had been a comfort just for being mine, had shifted while I wasn't looking. The wallpaper photo was still us on the ferry, but the edges of the ferry had changed. New safety signs, a different font. In my Photos app, Ferndale pictures had multiplied. A photo of me. Sweeping a porch, a photo of Anna, behind the front desk wearing a cardigan I'd never seen. The timestamps were wrong. They said last spring, last winter. I tried to breathe in a way that would convince my body that none of this is proof. At the edge of town, near the cemetery, there's a community board with flyers. Lost cat, choir practice, Tai Chi in the park. I stopped there because it was color and paper and pushpins, which felt like things that obeyed laws. I stared at a flyer for a harvest fair. It had a list of volunteers. A. March, MC Blake, N. Carter, A. Evans. Evans is my last name. It felt like something you write on a name tag at a conference to keep track of who you're supposed to be. Under the list was a phone number. I pulled my phone out to take a picture. The camera stuttered against the glare. The picture saved, and when I opened it, the names were there but in different order, and A. Evans wasn't on it. I drove out like a person whose body had been reclaimed by muscle memory. The road out of town felt longer than the road in. On 101, the world went back to being loud. Trucks bellowed. The radio hissed until a station snapped into place. I didn't play it. I needed the silence to have at least one thing I controlled. Hours south, the fog stayed in the rear view, a folded mountain of smoke. I told myself that in 2 more hours I would be home, and I would sit in my own chair and I would have to tell this story, and it would sound like I'd let a prank get under my skin. The closer I got, the more the invisible stairs returned to where they should be. I knew credit card pins again. I knew our landlord's last name. I knew the name of the plant that always dies in our kitchen no matter what we do. We don't have a house anymore, at least not the one we left. We have a place with a similar layout and a different crack in the tile, and the grill on the balcony is on the other side, and the neighbor upstairs doesn't wear heavy boots. Our mailbox had our name on it, my name and Anna's, but the font was different and I stood there too long reading it like it would shift if I blinked. Inside, our books have been rearranged the way they get when you've packed and unpacked in a hurry. There are new frames with familiar faces in them and old frames where the glass flickers a little when I look too hard, like a TV trying to hold on to a channel. I don't have a number for Anna anymore. I have a whole call log of Anna, our texts like you'd expect, memes, reminders, an argument about whether we had enough quarters for laundry. The last text from her is from Wednesday. Fog's thicker here than the bay, haha. When I call that number, a phone rings in a town that might not have cell service and then stops without voicemail. When I close my eyes at night, I hear the hum at the edges of things. It's manageable. It's background. It's like living near a freeway. You tell yourself it's just there and your brain filters it out until it doesn't. People will say I left her. They will say I panicked. They will be right and wrong in the same breath. If I drive back, which I have, there's a woman at the front desk of the boarding house that used to be the Rose Finch, and she has Anna's mouth and not her eyes. She calls herself Annie. She has a cardigan and a ledger and a way of speaking like she's decided quiet is safer. She doesn't know me. She thinks I'm sweet for asking if she needs anything from the city. She laughs at my jokes like they're old and comfortable without understanding why they're funny. When the fog comes in, she closes the heavy curtains like muscle memory, like she understands something about sound and shape, like we did once. The barista knows my order now. The sheriff tips his hat instead of the nod when he sees me. Mabel, except the bakery woman who looks like Mabel and isn't, wraps my cinnamon roll with an extra napkin and says, "See you tomorrow," in a way that makes me think I should say, "Like always." On the community board, a flyer needs a volunteer to run the coat check at the holiday. Fair. There's a line for name and phone. The pen is on a string. There's not a lot of space left on the line. Every night the hum comes and I practice not hearing it. Sometimes it feels like the sound is thinning, like a radio station drifting out of range. Sometimes it's so strong I can hear my mother singing that misremembered song, and I can taste the way the cold air in Ferndale feels on the back of my teeth. In the mornings, I make a list of names and places and timelines like I'm studying for a test. I say out loud the city I grew up in, the school where I met Anna, the apartment we lost to a bad landlord, the dog we almost adopted. I write, we rented a bed and breakfast. There were cookies. I write, Ferndale is lovely. If you're traveling up 101 and a brochure makes you think, hey, that looks like a photograph we could step into, you can. It's real. The taffy is good. The trees are bigger than your imagination. If you stay at a place with quilts and Mabel offers you earplugs, take them. If you hear a hum, put a pillow over your face and think of something boring. You're not stronger than sound. You are made of it. And if you find yourself staring at a flyer with your last name spelled out like somebody tried to remember it from a hum, you might think it's a coincidence. It might be. I hope, more than I've hoped for anything, that it is. But if you look up and see a woman at a desk with the mouth you have kissed for 10 years and she smiles at you without recognition and without fear, do not walk toward her through the fog. If you are me, do not ask her to remember. Let her hold the town's shape if that's what she holds now. Let someone else say your name into the hum. Hold on to yours. Say it out loud as you walk back to your car. Say it until it becomes heavy enough to carry. The Victorian town of Ferndale is picturesque by day, like I said. At night, a strange humming fills the streets. It sounds like hundreds of voices whispering through the fog. The locals warn newcomers never to listen closely. I ignored the advice because I thought I could parse anything if I took it apart. By morning, the first morning, I could feel the edges of what I was before we came. By the third, I can't tell you who I was in the way that matters. The hum gave me its version. I have written this down and saved it in 3 places. I have sent it to friends who will be kind and say I need sleep. If you're reading this and you decide to go anyway, as people do, send me a message when you get there. If I don't answer, it's possible I'm busy. It's possible I'm fine. It's possible I'm practicing the words of my own life in a room that looks like a photograph. Or maybe I'm down the street at the cafe and when you walk in, I'll be the one who looks up first, not because I know you, but because I always look up when the door opens, waiting to see if anyone says my name the way I remember it. Here's my account exactly as it happened. Believe it or don't. I'm writing it down because sleep hasn't felt safe since that night, and telling the story out loud keeps the edges of it from curling up and swallowing me. It was the last week of August, a Wednesday, and I was driving west on I-10 after visiting a client in Phoenix. I'd left too late. You know that stubborn optimism, I'll push through, I'll make it to Riverside. Then the desert night folded over the highway. The temperature dropped, but the roads shimmered like they were still boiling. I told myself I'd stop after the next town, after the next good exit, after the next cup of coffee. That's how you end up tired enough to see your headlights tug at the darkness like it's on a string. Blythe was the plan. I'd stayed there once before. Gas chain motel burrito stand still open at midnight. But around 11:30, just after the exit for Midland Road, the fuel light blinked. I still had a quarter tank according to the gauge, but the light said otherwise. I blamed the heat or the age of my car or the universe. I took the next exit I saw, a wind-battered sign with a coffee cup icon and the word lodging underneath. No brand names. No distance. Just an arrow pointing south. The ramp fed into a short, cracked frontage road that ran parallel to the interstate for a bit before slanting away into the scrub. No lights, no other cars. I watched my GPS spin and then freeze like it had given up. The road narrowed and the asphalt turned into something older, patched and lumpy. Gravel crouched at the edges, trying to drag the tires off. I almost turned around, then past a sagging barbed wire fence and a billboard that had peeled to gray. I saw it. A low, squat, single-story motel like a long domino. Maybe 12 rooms, maybe 15. A U-curve around a small parking lot with a dead palm in the center and a metal sign out by the road. The sign had no name, just rust and one tube of neon that sputtered the word vacancy like it wasn't sure what it meant. I pulled in. The headlights washed over the building and every window reflected back at me like a row of open eyes. The paint had once been a cheerful teal. Now it was a cigarette stain. The roofline sagged in the middle like a tired smile. But the office light was on. A bell on the counter. A Coke machine near the ice bin thumped every few seconds as if something heavy inside it was trying to get out. A man appeared behind the desk, almost before the bell finished ringing. Not old, but worn. Tan like leather left out in the sun. Dark hair combed too carefully like he'd learned neatness from a page in a magazine. He wore a white shirt with a name tag that might have said Tom or Tim. The ink was faded to a bruise. "Evening," he said. The smile he gave me was gentle and practiced. It didn't touch his eyes. "Do you have a room?" I asked stupidly, given the vacancy posted in stuttering light. "Sure do." He slid a registration card across in a plastic sleeve. "Just for one night?" "Just one. I'm trying to get to California by morning." I was already fishing out my card. "Place is quiet. Quiet as we can keep it. Desert takes the noise." He found a pen and tapped the signature line. "Where you headed in California?" "Riverside, then up to Pasadena." He nodded like he could see the turns. "You'll want an early start. The sun comes up hard." He ran the card through an old swipe reader that made a long complaining noise. "Wi-Fi's temperamental," he said as if he'd learned that word recently. "Ice machines on the fritz. Coke's cold though. The rate was cheap. Too cheap for California even out here." I told myself it was because it wasn't a chain, because the highway had starved it out. I signed the card. He placed an actual metal key on the counter, not a plastic fob. An honest-to-God silver key attached to a red diamond keychain with a flaking white number. 12. "Room 12, he said. "End of the left wing. Park right out front so we can keep an eye on you." "We? Me and the night," he said, the way some people say me and the missus. He slid a small notepad toward me. "If you want a wake-up call, write the time. Phone lines are, you know how it is." I didn't, but I nodded. He seemed pleased that we'd agreed on something vague. I wrote 5:30 a.m. He tore the paper off and tucked it under the edge of the register like a secret. "You want coffee?" "If it's fresh," I said, trying to joke. "It's recent." He poured from a glass pot that had surely seen things. It tasted like mud and pennies and saved my life anyway. Outside, a wind had picked up. It smelled like dust and old weeds. I parked in front of 12. Up close, the paint flakes looked like fish scales. The window was covered by a curtain printed with palm fronds so faded they could have been feathers. Behind the curtain, just for a second, I saw a silhouette, someone standing still, facing out. It could have been my reflection. I told myself it was. The key stuck a little in the lock and then gave. The room smelled like cleaner that had lost the battle with whatever it was supposed to fight. The wall unit coughed cool air. The bedspread was the color of oatmeal that's been left out, patterned with tiny seashells. There was a Bible in the drawer and a laminated menu for a diner that had a phone number with too few digits. A square TV sat on a dresser like a heavy thought. On the bedside table, instead of an alarm clock, there was a wind-up kitchen timer. The bathroom surprised me by being spotless. Tiles scrubbed nearly to bone. An old bar of soap still in paper. I told myself I was being dramatic. A bed is a bed is a bed. I texted my girlfriend Lena, made it cheerful. Found a room, getting some sleep. She sent back a photo of our cat with his tongue out, then, "Call me when you wake up. Be safe." I thumbed a heart and put the phone face down. No service anyway. Only that Wi-Fi that asked me for a password and then froze. I brushed my teeth with bottled water. Ate the stale donut I'd bought in Quartzsite, wishing I'd bought two. I left the TV on for noise. It caught one local channel through the rabbit ears, some late movie with washed-out actors. At the bottom of the screen, the station ID read K something. The letters flickered like they were being erased and redrawn by hand. Every few minutes there was a thump from outside, regular enough that it began to feel like part of the room. I told myself it was the Coke machine resetting or the ice bin trying to be relevant. An hour passed like a small animal creeping along the wall, stopping and sniffing at every nail. Around 1 a.m., I went back out to the car for my second bag, the one with my work laptop and a folder I didn't want to leave. The lot looked different in that way that the same space can look when you've been inside too long. The dead palm's fronds ticked against one another like fingernails. The windows of the other rooms were lit up, all of them, curtain edges glowing. In two of them I saw figures standing at the glass again, just silhouettes as if waiting for someone to wave. When I looked straight at them, they didn't move. When I looked away, they seemed to lean closer. On my way past the office, I glanced in. The clerk, Tom or Tim, was at the desk, eyes on a ledger, lips moving like he was reading a prayer. On the counter by the bell sat an old rotary phone with no cord. He had placed the piece of paper with my wake-up call request under the receiver, as if the phone would remember it for him. I didn't sleep. I hovered. The TV hissed and clicked. The air conditioner coughed and took a long, rattling breath, and sometimes it paused just short of turning off, as if listening to see if I was asleep yet. Once, a car engine passed on the road beyond and faded like a memory someone decided wasn't worth keeping. At 2:13, there was a soft knock at my door. Not tentative, not aggressive. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps, like a pattern a kid makes in class when they're bored. I went still. The knock repeated, same rhythm. I looked through the peephole. It showed me nothing but the wrong angle. The empty corner of the window, a slice of sky, the silver edge of my car's roof. I don't know why I didn't say, "Who is it?" Maybe because my voice would have made it real. The knock came a third time. Then a whisper slid through the crack under the door, so faint I almost blamed the AC for trying a new trick. "Hey." I froze harder. A shape crossed my window, just a break in the dark. The whisper again, right at the door this time, patient and almost smiling. "Hey, you awake?" I backed into the bathroom, ridiculous, as if a thin door meant anything. The kitchen timer on the bedside table ticked once, just one dry click, and stopped. The TV went to static, not the modern solid gray, but old snow, like the channel had filled up with wind. Then I heard the click of my car's door handle. Twice, then 3 times in quick succession, like someone impatient checking. "Hey." Closer now. The whisper was scraping along the paint. "You in 12? I stood there with a toothbrush still in my hand like a weapon. I dialed 911 on my phone out of instinct. No bars. I opened my camera and took a photo through the window at an angle, like maybe the flash would catch something outside that I couldn't see. The photo came out almost entirely black except for a pale blur that might have been the Coke machine, or might have been my own hand. The timestamp read 2:16 a.m. The whisper moved away after a while, or I imagined it did. I sat on the bed with my back to the headboard and watched the door. At some point, a woman's voice drifted from somewhere, maybe 2 rooms down, maybe the office. It was just clear enough to understand the shape of it, but not the words, like hearing your name said underwater. Time went gelatinous. I stared at the clock on my phone and watched it tick from 2:29 to 2:31 without passing 2:30. I told myself I'd complain in the morning, carefully so the clerk wouldn't feel accused. These places survive on reviews. I imagined the sentence I would write. Largely fine. Suspicious knock at 2 a.m., probably a mistaken door. At 5:28, 2 minutes before my requested wake-up, the phone on the bedside table rang. Except there was no phone. I had the sound in my head so clearly. Shrill, mechanical, like every motel phone I've ever hated, that I almost reached for a receiver. Then I realized it was the rotary phone in the office. Echoing faintly through the thin walls, its ring splitting around the corners of the building and arriving in my room like a memory. It rang 3 times and stopped. I waited for pipes to groan, for footsteps, for the clerk to do whatever he did. The air conditioner exhaled. The Coke machine thumped once as if answering. At 5:30, there was a knock at my door again. A single firm knuckle. I went to the peephole with more courage than sense. Through that badly placed circle, I saw the parking lot, dust colored by dawn, my car, the dead palm, and the corner of the office window glowing. No person, no feet. I opened the door, because apparently I was the kind of person who did that in horror stories. No one stood there, but on the concrete just outside, someone had set a styrofoam cup of coffee with an old-fashioned plastic lid, the kind you peel back. The coffee steamed in the chill. Next to it, a small paper bag folded twice. I looked left. Room 11's curtain slipped and then stilled. I looked right. Room 13's curtain was wide open and the room beyond dark like a mouth. The cup was warm in my hand. The bag held a cellophane-wrapped muffin with a Best Buy date that had smudged. The smell rising from the coffee was surprisingly normal, like gas station coffee, burned and comforting. I told myself the clerk was being kind. I told myself this was hospitality. I brought it in. I didn't drink it. At 6:10, dressed and packed, I headed to the office to check out and buy a bottle of water that I'd seen in the mini fridge by the bell. A woman stood in the doorway of room 10, gray braid over her shoulder, smoking like she had been doing it in this exact spot for 1,000 mornings. She watched me the way people at laundromats watch new people, curious, not unkind. I lifted a small hand and said, "Morning." She exhaled and said, "They put you in 12?" Her voice had that desert sand in it. I paused. "Yeah." Her eyes moved to the cup in my hand, then to my face. She nodded like she had predicted it. "Don't drink that." "Okay," I said too quickly. "Not that it'll hurt you. It's just old." She ground the cigarette against the door frame like it was a ritual. "You leaving early?" "Long drive," I said. She looked past me at the office. "Don't forget your key." Inside, the clerk wasn't at the counter. The ledger sat open. The bell didn't work when I pressed it. It didn't even jiggle. I said, "Hello?" And as if he'd been standing right behind the door the whole time, he appeared, face arranged back into that polite smile. "Sleep okay?" he asked, as if he was determined to mishear me if I said no. "Fine," I lied. "Thanks for the coffee." "Ah," he said like it was a shared joke. Sun comes up hard. I handed him the key. While he tucked it under the counter, I glanced down at the ledger. The room list had been written in neat, looping hand. Beside each room number, a name in pencil. Mine sat next to 12, spelled right. Some of the other names had smears through them, faint erasures that didn't quite take. Room 9 had the same last name as mine. The date at the top was August 29th. Below it, in a lighter press of the pencil, August 29th. Below that, so faint I almost missed it. August 29th. Receipt? I asked because I still have the impulse to keep things official. He looked at me like that was an unusual request and then nodded and tore off a rectangle from a pad. The paper was thin and smelled like an attic. Total $42. He stamped it with an oval blue stamp. The ink bled out like it was drowning. On the stamp, where the motel's name should be, there was just a blurred shape, as if someone had rubbed their thumb over it for years. "I'm just down the road if you need anything," he said, which didn't make sense because he was right here. I went back out into the pale morning. The woman in room 10 had gone inside. Door left open a handspan. The figure in room 11 was at the window again, still and interested. When I glanced back at 12, I noticed my room number plaque was crooked. It had been straight last night. I told myself, screws loosen. I pulled onto the old road and then back to the frontage. The interstate hummed in the near distance. I glanced in my rear view. The motel sat square in the mirror, small against the big light. The vacancy neon weakly brave. Then the mirror shook with the seams in the pavement and I looked forward again. I merged onto I-10, thumbed the radio and found nothing but AM weather. The voice said the high would be 106. The voice said the winds would shift. I drove 20 minutes before remembering that I'd meant to top off the gas. I took the next exit into Blythe, bought a burrito from a place that had already been open long enough to make the grease smell like comfort, and fueled up. There was a pang in my stomach when I looked back toward the desert. It felt like leaving a weird party without saying goodbye. I checked my phone. Service had returned. Lena had texted twice around midnight, then again at 5:37. "You good?" I called her and told her the quick version. She laughed when I mentioned the coffee like it was 50-50 charming and creepy. "Send me the pin," she said. "We'll stop there on the way back next month. I want to see your haunted Coke machine." I tried to drop a pin on the map. My recents showed the before and after, but not that little road. I zoomed in. I dragged. The green of the satellite view crumbled into tan. The frontage road was there. The barbed wire fence was a faint line. But where the motel should have been, the map showed an empty rectangle of dirt, the shadow of a dead palm trunk like a bruise, and the shape of a metal sign frame with no head. "Bad satellite image," I said. "Desert eats the signal." I drove back that afternoon. I didn't tell Lena. I told myself it was curiosity. I told myself it was just a wrong turn and a second set of daylight eyes would show me the right one. The same exit. The same sagging billboard. The same fence. The same frontage road that leaned away from the interstate into a little scrape of flat ground where you could imagine a motel being once. No building, no office, no row of windows. Only the lot, curling with weeds, the shape of parking spaces visible like old bandages. In the middle, the dead palm stood exactly where I remembered it, a stripped pole. Near the road, a rusted metal sign frame pointed at nothing. The neon had long ago disappeared. The letters, if they had ever been there, were ghosts of themselves. I parked anyway. The gravel under my tires sounded like a whispering crowd. When I stepped out, the heat went straight through my shoes. Someone had put down a carpet of bottle caps near where the office would have been, hammered flat by season after season. In the dirt, something white flashed. I crouched. It was a small piece of plastic with a red diamond printed on it, half buried. I brushed dirt away. The number 2 stared up at me. The other digit was broken off. I stood exactly where I remembered the office door and looked out at the world from that angle, like I could make the building reappear by behaving as if it was there. The interstate sang beyond, indifferent. The wind made the palm fronds clatter and then fall quiet. When it did, I heard something I didn't recognize as a sound at first. Not a knock, not a voice. The quiet returns in the desert have a weight. This was a little less, a lessening of the quiet, a holding of breath. I took out the paper receipt and held it up. The blue stamp had faded in the hours since morning. The oval was hardly there. The amount, 42.0, was still clear. Beneath it, in the slanted hand I'd seen in the ledger, someone had written, "Thank you, room 12." The ink had smudged, as if touched by a thumb. When I turned the paper over, the back was blank, except for a smear that could have been coffee. I wanted to be done. I wanted to be practical. I told myself. Old building torn down, old receipt pad left in the desk, weird neighbors who like to watch. I wanted to be the kind of person who could leave a place like that in their rear view and never think of it again. I walked back toward my car with the receipt in my pocket and the piece of plastic in my hand. It wasn't until I got inside and closed the door that I saw it lying on the passenger seat. The styrofoam cup of coffee from that morning, lid peeled back in a grin. I hadn't brought it. I'm sure I hadn't, but there it was, half empty. The surface filmed over with a skin that wrinkled when the car shifted weight. I drove back to Blythe with my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Told myself I'd toss the cup at the first trash can. Didn't. I drove home to Riverside that night like speed could outrun a thing that knew all the ways to wait. When I finally slept, it was that thin, bad sleep where your ears do all the work. Somewhere around 2:16 a.m. there was a knock. 3 paws too. Not on my front door. Not on the bedroom door. From inside the wall, like the old plaster had learned the rhythm. I lay there and counted seconds. Lena stirred and said, "Did you hear that?" I said no. I said it too quickly. I put the receipt in a drawer under a stack of warranties. The next day I pulled it out to show a friend who loves these stories, who collects them like others collect stamps. The blue ink was gone. Not faded, gone, as if bleached. The pencil note on the front, "Thank you, room 12, had softened until it was more suggestion than word. My name was still there, neat and right, but when I ran my finger over it, graphite dust came away like ash. I tried to pull the photo from my phone to show him, the one I took through the window when someone tried my car door. It was there, black as I remembered, except when I tapped to zoom I saw something I hadn't let myself see. Near the far edge of the frame, high and narrow, 2 lighter ovals like a face just outside looking in. No features, just presence. When I zoomed again, the photo app crashed and kicked me back to the home screen. When I reopened it, the picture was still there, but the timestamp now said 2:13 a.m. A month later, back in Phoenix for the same client, I tried to find the road again. I left earlier this time, stopped for a real dinner, told Lena I was going to try and prove a point to myself. The fence was there. The billboard leaned. The metal sign frame tossed its shadow like a fishbone. I parked and walked the lot, palms sweaty for no reason. I told myself I would stand where room 12 once stood and wait 10 minutes, and then I would go. I stood there. I waited. The desert made its old soft sounds. The lessening silence came and went like a breath. At 5:30 p.m., the time I had once asked to be woken, the wind picked up without a warning gust or a shift in the highway stream. It just decided to be present. The dead palm rustled with no humor. The metal sign frame hummed. From nowhere I could point to a phone rang far away and right next to me. 3 rings, then nothing. I went home without telling anyone that part. If you asked me why I'm writing this now months later, I'd say it's because the story has kept writing itself in small, annoying ways. Every motel I pass at night looks like that one. Every office smells like old receipts. Lena found a red plastic diamond in the dryer lint trap 2 weeks ago. It had no number. She held it up and said, "Did you go to a theme party without me?" I said it was from a keychain I didn't remember owning. Then I watched her set it on the counter and we never saw it again. If you're looking for a moral or a punchline, I don't have one. I have only the parts you can touch, a picture that won't hold still, a receipt that doesn't want to belong to any business, gas station coffee that tastes like being looked at. I didn't see a ghost. I didn't get dragged into a hall. No blood, no claws, just a place that was there when I needed it and gone when I went back, which is true of more things than you think. If you find yourself heading west past midnight, convincing yourself you'll make it to Riverside, and you see that unbranded sign with the crooked arrow pointing south, maybe don't take it. Or if you do, be polite. Sign your name neatly. Write your wake-up time clearly. Don't drink the coffee. Park right in front of your door so they can keep an eye on you. When the knock comes, 3, pause 2. Don't answer even if the voice sounds familiar. I'm still in my house miles away, door dead-bolted, neighbor's porch light shining through the blinds. It's just past 2:16 a.m. as I finish this, and the cat is staring at the corner where the wall meets the floor listening. The air conditioner just took one long rattling breath and then paused like it was listening too. There's no motel here. There's no desk clerk with a soft smile. There's no rotary phone with my name tucked under it. I keep telling myself that. Somewhere below the paint something taps, 3, pause 2, and from the street a car door handle clicks, patient and certain, checking. I work nights on the Union Pacific line through Dunsmuir, California. Track inspector, 3rd shift, 2 on, 2 off. I'm not a superhero or a ghost hunter. I'm a guy in reflective pants who carries a wrench big enough to knock out a mule and a handheld lamp that makes better friends with moths than with me. Folks around here are proud of the rails. The whole town is built against the sound of steel, you know? Old-timers can tell one engine from another by the tone of the horn. Kids fall asleep to the rumble like it's a lullaby. You live with it the way you live with the river and the mountains. It's not background, it's bone. There's a legend they tell. The phantom freight that screams through at 3 a.m. Never shows on the schedule, never stops. Like the night itself is hauling something you don't want to look at. People swear they've heard it. Long horn, too long, so long it sounds almost human. I used to roll my eyes. The tracks are busy. There's always something rolling through. Myth loves a timetable. I was 34 when this started, coming off a divorce and too stubborn to give up the shift differential. I liked nights. The dark kept things simple. My crew then was usually me and Miguel, who could fix anything with baling wire and a good curse. And sometimes Walt, a retired conductor who still came around because the rails were in his blood and the casino wasn't. Walt said the dead trains are always on time. He'd snort when he said it like he'd heard better jokes. 3 a.m., he'd tell anyone new, tapping the face of his busted Timex. When all the mistakes of your life wake up at once. That winter, the fog settled low in the canyon and stayed there like it was paying rent. I remember walking between mile markers with the world shrunk down to the cone of my headlamp. You could taste cold metal in the air. I'd swing my light along the rails and see my boot prints appear and vanish like someone else had just been there. It made the line feel shorter somehow, closer. You can call it a mood if you want, but people do risky things when the distance between them and the dark gets small. On the last Tuesday before Christmas, I got called in because the crossing arms at Pine Street jammed down and stayed there. Modern systems fail safe. If a sensor hiccups, those arms drop like a bar in a prison, and it's up to us to figure out why. The dispatcher that night was a woman named Karen who sounded like she drank coffee straight from the pot and didn't believe in afterlives. She patched me and Miguel onto the same channel. Arm failure at Pine, she said. No scheduled trains between 2:40 and 3:20. You've got a 20-minute window. Don't play in traffic. No traffic at this hour, Miguel said. Just your sweet voice, Karen. Keep dreaming, she said, and clicked off. We rolled out in the maintenance truck, heater fighting the fog that crawled into everything. Pine Street is a small crossing tucked between a diner where the pancakes are tough as a boot and a used bookstore that sells more postcards than books. At 2:48, the arms were down. The red lights pulsing, the bell clanging, that hollow clank you hear in your ribs. No train. Just empty tracks stretching into the white. You take the control box, I'll check the relays, I told Miguel. He popped the panel, stared at the logic lights and swore soft in Spanish. What? I said. Nothing. Just a little Christmas tree in here. We had 8 minutes by Karen's count. I jogged down the ballast to the relay case. The fog drifted around my knees like I was standing in milk. My lamp caught ice on the tie plates. No track circuit occupancy lights. No pressure from a train. The system thought there was one, though. It wouldn't be the first time moisture fooled a circuit. I wiped condensation, reseated a connector, tapped a relay with the handle of my wrench like an old TV. Nothing. A horn blew from upriver. Not a blast, a moan. It caught the fog and stretched it thin. I looked at my watch, 2:57. I toggled my radio. Karen, you seeing anything? I asked. Negative, she said. Next movement is an intermodal cleared out of Reading at 3:20. Why? Horn, I said. Miguel looked up from the panel, eyebrows folding. Another blast. It didn't sound like an engine announcing a crossing. It sounded like someone testing how long a human breath can last. Walt's late-night train, Miguel said, trying to joke. His laugh didn't carry past his scarf. Arms down, I said. We're on the track. Back it up. We got off the steel in a hurry. The bell kept clanging. From upriver, past the bend where the tracks crossed the river on that iron trestle, I saw it. A headlight. Pinprick, then coin, then mouth. It barreled toward us, glass white, haloed by fog. The rail under my boot started to tremble. Dispatch, I have a movement, I said. Pine crossing. You got a ghost on your board because it's on my track. Karen's voice came back flat as paper. Negative movement, Evan, I'm telling you. I see nothing. You're hearing a horn. You need to clear the right-of-way anyway. We're clear, I said. But if this thing's... The horn wound up again. It wasn't like any horn I knew. It sounded thin, like a recording played back at the wrong speed. Miguel and I watched the light and the fog opened and it hit the crossing. It looked like a freight, but wrong in all the ways that matter. You know how a train feels when it moves? How you can feel the couplers banging and the steel flexing, how each car breathes a little different? This was like someone drew the outline of a freight and forgot to color it in. It moved as a single piece, a black shape that didn't reflect my light. The headlight was too bright but somehow didn't throw shadows. And the horn, God, the horn skinned the night. The red lights at the crossing pulsed on its surface like reflections in oil. There's no numbers, Miguel said. His voice sounded far away. No markings. I did something I'm not proud of. I stepped closer. The fear I felt wasn't run. It was prove this is physics. I wanted some detail, some real thing I could point at later and say it was a trick of the fog. The boxcar nearest me slid past. I lifted my lamp to see wheels. There weren't any. Where the truck should have been, there was just the shimmer of heat, like air over asphalt. The ballast under it was not disturbed. The rails didn't spark. The only sound besides that horn was the bell at the crossing, dogging the fog like a heartbeat. And then I looked at the car sides. At first they looked just dirty, coated with the same ice the town had. Then my eyes adjusted. The dirt had patterns, faces, hundreds of faces, pressed against the inside of the windows that weren't windows. Mouth-open faces like those fish you find up near McLeod. Pale and slick and deserving pity until you realize they do not blink. The faces slid by at the speed of a slow nightmare. Some were men, some were women, some kids with sleep-mussed hair. None of them open-mouthed in a scream that made sound. I'll say that again because it matters. Their mouths were twisted into screams, but they made no noise. All the sound came from the horn. Evan, Miguel said very quietly. Don't look at them, I looked anyway. That's how I saw it. A man in a window with a reflective stripe across his chest like the one across mine. The lamp on my shoulder made a yellow splash on his jacket, and I watched that same splash appear and travel across him. His face was my face, warped as if in old glass. He didn't blink either. He just watched me slide by, and I watched him. My own jaw was open in that silent railcar scream. I took a step back and my heel skidded on ballast. I dropped to one knee, lamp twisting. The horn went higher, the way a tea kettle does when it's boiling off the last inch. Miguel grabbed my arm and hauled. The black train slid on and on, through the crossing, past the diner and the dark bookstore, toward the south where the canyon tightens. It didn't throw wind. It didn't drop a single piece of grit. It just went. At the tail, there should have been a flashing red marker. Instead, there was nothing, no end. The last car went by and there was no last car. It was over and it wasn't. Then the bell at the crossing stopped. The arms jumped up. The street was empty. I breathed. Miguel breathed. We just stood there and breathed big coats of fog and looked at each other like new animals. The radio crackled. Karen said, "Either one of you want to explain why Pine's trouble light just cleared itself? And while you're at it, tell me why you spent 3 minutes off the channel." "We had a train," I said. My voice didn't sound like me. "A freight. No numbers." Evan, there was nothing," Karen said, not unkindly. "I have eyes on every block from Lakehead to Castle Crags. If there's a train, I see a train. If someone's playing a prank, it's not on the board. What do I tell the foreman when he asks what you did out there?" Miguel clicked his mic. "Tell him we fixed a relay," he said. "We'll log it as moisture," I added. We reseated connectors. "We'll check again at dawn." Miguel and I didn't talk more until we were back at the yard. We moved like old men. He lit a cigarette and I didn't call him on it even though the whole shop is posted no smoking. "You saw your face, didn't you?" he asked. I didn't answer. "You say things out loud, they stick." He nodded anyway, like I'd admitted it. "Walt says if you look at it, it looks back." "Walt's full of bull," I said. "Sure," Miguel said. He flicked ash. "You still coming to my kid's party Saturday? I want someone around who knows where the breaker box is." "Yeah," I said. And the normalcy of that promise made me feel grounded, also trapped. I went home to my rented room above the hardware store. My ex-wife Leah texted me at 5:12. "You doing okay? Holiday blues are real." I stared at the phone, thumb hovering. I typed fine, then deleted it, then typed I saw something tonight. Then I deleted that too. I sent I'm good. "Merry almost Christmas." She sent a string of snowflake emojis. I fell asleep to the heater clicking on and off like a bad idea. I didn't talk to anyone about it except for Walt. I found him the next night at the yard. Batch of bad coffee steaming in a stained thermos, knit cap pulled down to his eyebrows. I told him what we'd seen. When I finished, he didn't crack a joke. "You looked at the windows," he said. "Yeah." "You see yourself?" I did. He stirred powdered creamer into his coffee like he was mixing cement. "First time I saw it, I was 26, he said. Back when the valley fire ran all the way to the reservoir. I was braking on a southbound, and that thing came up the other track like a memory someone else had. Saw my own ugly mug in it, too. Wasn't as handsome then either. What is it?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. And for once, the truth wasn't a dodge. I know every summer we get tourists who want to take pictures, and every winter we get stories. Some nights are busy with scheduled freights and nobody notices anything unusual. Then a fog night comes and folks swear they heard a horn that wasn't on any timetable. The accidents we've had. Men falling between cars, bad couplers, kids walking the tracks with headphones. People say it's all the phantom. That's humans talking. We pin mystery to the first nail we can reach. What I know is this. If you see yourself, buddy, don't go near a crossing at 3. "Is that superstition?" I said, "or experience?" He smiled like a grandfather who's seen every trick you're about to pull. "Do I need to label it for it to matter?" That week dragged. I checked the same stretch of rail I always check. The bridge at the trestle where the river runs like a swallowed breath. The siding by the old sawmill where teenagers tag the uses of love. The switch heater that works only when you sweet talk it. People bought cocoa at the diner and pretended not to look out the windows toward Pine Street. At 2:50 on Friday, Karen pinged me. "Heads up," she said. "We've got an unscheduled high rail inspection coming north. He's 10 minutes out. He'll take the main through town. Don't trip over him. You got an employee name?" I asked. "New contractor," she said. "A Waterman Rail Services guy. Walt says he knows the company. Call sign is WR712. "Copy that," I said. I told Miguel and he shrugged. The fog was thinner that night, more like breath than blanket. Even so, I felt it. The expectant hush that sounds like a crowd holding its breath before a coin flip. Every sound ticked louder. The creak of the signal mast, the snap of my radio switching channels, the distant bark of a dog that was actually a fox. At 2:58, a high rail truck rolled through Dunsmuir from the south like a sleepy beetle. Little light bar strobing amber. Wheels dropped onto the rails. It was white with WR712 stenciled in blue. The driver lifted 2 fingers on the wheel at us. The Universal Railroad hello. He disappeared around the curve toward the trestle. We had eyes on him the whole time, our eyes, the block sensors, the repeater showing occupancy. Normal. I breathed easier. Let 3 a.m. come and go with something explainable in the mix. 3 o'clock came, and with it the horn again. This time it came from both north and south, like the canyon itself was blowing. The high rail truck's taillights were still visible, bobbing where the track threw its little ups and downs. The horn laid over it like an animal laying claim. I toggled to Karen. "You hearing this?" I asked. There was a beat and I heard, just faint, the same horn through her headset mic. "Copy," she said, voice tight. "Occupancy shows the truck." "That's it." "That's not it," I said, from the North Bend light. Not headlight white, but a smear like a comet. From the south, down by the mill, a second smear. The high rail truck was between them. "WR712, you on this channel?" I said. "You're about to get passed by something. Clear to the siding if you can." No answer. The truck kept rolling, steady and dumb, like it was on a track, which it was. The smears widened. The horn swelled until my teeth ached. I started running. Pine Street felt like it was moving under me, not me over it. Miguel shouted my name like he was calling down a well. I made the tracks just as the north smear hit the trestle. The high rail truck was halfway across. In school, they teach you momentum and mass and how nothing can occupy the same space as something else. The thing that hit the truck solved that by not being a thing. It poured over the high rail like fog over a fence, and for a second I saw the driver, his face in that blank press of not quite glass, in the same flicker of not quite window that had held my own face. His mouth was open in that mute scream, and behind him were others, all watching. My lamp's spill of light landed on his chest, and I saw the stripe again. My stripe reflecting back from 100 angles like the glass had been shattered and reassembled wrong. The horn didn't change tone. The truck's amber light spun once, twice, and then it wasn't there. There was no crash. There was only absence. The south smear met the north smear at the trestle, and they went through each other like two shadows, blending and passing and parting again, and then they slid on into the fog, going opposite ways that both felt wrong. The radio exploded with Karen's voice. "I've lost WR712. I've lost him on my board." "I lost him, too," I said, though what I meant was something I don't know how to say. "I'm going on foot." "Do not go on the bridge," Karen said, and she was right. I didn't. I went down the slope to the river, boots sliding dirt and shale, weeds clawing my coat, until I stood under the trestle with the pines looming like jurors. I pointed my lamp into the girders. No truck. The slush on the river hummed along like a belt on a machine. Where the high rail should have been, there were only the tracks and the white breath of the night. A second light glowed. Not from my lamp. From the surface of the water. It looked like a reflection, like the ghost of an amber strobe. It pulsed 3 times, weak and weaker, and done. The horn wound down, slow, as if it hated to leave. "Evan," Miguel said at my shoulder. Soft. "I'm here," I said, because I needed to hear it. Because I needed someone else to hear it. Because saying it made it more true. They searched in the morning. County, railroad, fish and wildlife. They found tire impressions at the set-off near the old mill, where the high rail chose the steel. They found footprints, mine and Miguel's and Walt's, from 100 nights, crossing and recrossing and not telling anyone outside the rails how we keep this spine of steel healthy. They didn't find a truck. The company, Waterman Rail Services, swore up and down they had no WR712. Karen printed out her block occupancy logs. There was no record. I stood by while a man in a jacket that said incident response asked me for the 3rd time if I'd consumed alcohol on duty. "I saw what I saw," I said. He nodded, the way people nod when they're auditing your mental health. "Do you want to talk to someone?" he asked. "I'm talking to you," I said. He wrote that down too. Miguel didn't come to work that night. His wife called in. He felt sick. Walt came to the yard, put a hand on my shoulder, and left without saying anything at all. Karen routed traffic around us like she was playing chess against a cheater. At 2:30, the diner closed early, because of family, and I watched the waitress lock the door while pretending not to see me in my reflective stripe. At 2:59, I stood at Pine Street and felt the whole town hold its breath. I looked into the fog where the light would appear if it was going to, and I thought about Leah and about faces and about being looked at and being the thing that looks back. The horn didn't come. Not that night. The arms stayed up. At 3:04, an actual scheduled freight rolled through. BNSF run through power. Graffiti that looked like someone's loud prayer. Wheels throwing sparks at a joint bar I'd been nagging the foreman to replace. The horn blew just right, 2 long, 1 short, 1 long. It sounded gloriously alive and imperfect. A week passed, then another. Miguel came back, but he didn't stay late. He stopped joking with Karen. He stopped walking the tracks in the fog. He started avoiding the word train. When I asked his wife if the party was still on, she said they were going to visit her mother in Red Bluff. I said that sounded nice. People do what they need to feel safe in a town with a story. Walt died in February. Heart, they said. He died in his chair watching a VHS of a railroad documentary he could quote from beginning to end. We went to his funeral at the community hall near the river. The preacher talked about journeys. The table held ham sandwiches people pretended to eat. We told stories about Walt leaving a whole car behind once and telling no one for 20 miles. We did not tell stories about 3 a.m. The fog that day rose off the river like smoke. That spring, the daytime warmed. The nights stayed cold and the schedule ran like a clock that had finally decided to cooperate. I would have told you things were going back to normal if you asked. I was even saying yes when Leah dared to suggest coffee, see how we were doing. You can't live in a long fear. Your bones get tired. Then in May, the bookstore lady Ruth asked if I could come look at a camera. I've got that dome camera on the eave that points at the crossing, she said. It's been glitching at night. Nothing important, it's a small town. We look after each other's stuff. I went because you do. You help your neighbors and you also help yourself feel like the world obeys screws and bolts. Ruth is 67 and wears a key on a string around her neck like a character in a mystery. We stood on a rickety ladder under the eave and I unscrewed the smoked plastic cover, while sparrows yelled at us from the gutter. I wiped dew off the lens. I reseated the barrel connector. Same as a relay in a crossing box. Same as anything. Disconnect, count to 10, reconnect, pretend we have power over what flickers. You mind if I look at the footage? I asked. Ruth hesitated. I should say no, she said, then smiled. But you saved me a service call. Come in. We watched on her old desktop. The monitor had a smudge like a thumbprint you couldn't wipe off. She queued up nights at 3 a.m., sped through them with the little scrubber. The footage was grainy, grayscale, the kind that makes real things look halfway made up. Monday, nothing but a cat who thought about crossing and didn't. Tuesday, a man on a bicycle, head down, ghost legs spinning. Wednesday, blank. Thursday at 3:14, a smear entered the top of the frame from the north. The timestamp froze and jumped and a bar of pixelation rolled across the picture like a heat haze. The crossing lights came on and off like they couldn't decide if they were dreaming. The smear crossed and the footage stuttered, and this is the part I keep coming back to. There was one frame, one single frame, where the image was sharp. In that frame you could see cars. You could see faces pressed to whatever wasn't windows. You could see, clear as Ruth's key on her string, your own reflection if you were unlucky enough to be standing at the edge of the frame. I was. I saw myself over by the signal bungalow, my lamp throwing a slice on the panel. The person in the window looking back saw me at the same angle. Same turned shoulder, same bent knee, same stripe, same face. Ruth didn't look at me. She clicked to the next frame and the world went back to gray-smeared motion. That's the glitch, she said softly. You should delete this, I said. It'll only make people see what they want to see. I don't know what I want to see anymore, she said, and put her hand on the mouse like it was a bird she wasn't sure would trust her. I didn't sleep that day. I went home, turned my phone face down, lay on the bed fully dressed, and listened to the pipes in the wall. At some point the building shuddered as a freight rolled by and the glass in the window hummed, and I felt that cheap sleep you get when your brain is trying to sneak out without you. At 2:40, back at the yard, I told Karen I was taking Pine Street. She didn't argue. Everyone pretended we'd never logged moisture there. I walked out alone. The fog wasn't bad. The moon saw its way through it as a pale coin. I took my lamp because habit is the last religion. I stood where I'd stood that first night, boots planted on the safe side, the angle where you can see into the bend. The red lights stayed dark. The arm stayed up. The river shushed under the trestle like someone comforting a kid. I looked north and south and tried to relax your face when you're posing for a picture, because it was so easy to imagine I wasn't looking into the dark at all. I was looking into a window and the dark was looking back from the other side. I thought about the high rail truck and how sometimes missing things are kinder than found ones. I thought about what Walt said about 3 a.m., being when all our mistakes wake up. I wondered if the phantom carried anything at all, or if it was empty, a mirror that only picked up what we brought to it. I didn't hear the horn first. I heard the bell at the crossing start to clang, like a memory being rung up for sale. Then the red lights popped on. The radio hissed and died in my hand like someone let go of the transmit. From the north, light, not bright like a headlight, familiar like a bathroom mirror and bad fluorescent. I didn't move. I raised my lamp, not at it but to the side of me, letting the spill catch my own jacket stripe. The moving shape slid into the crossing and the faces, God help me, pressed wageless against the almost glass. There was mine, as expected, watching me watch it. And then beside it, on the same window, like two heads crowding into somebody's selfie, there was another face. Leah. Not the Leah I had last seen through a coffee shop window, hair tucked behind her ear, patient with me the way you get with someone you've decided to be kind to because the other option makes you smaller. This Leah looked like she'd just woken from a bad nap. Her hair was messed from a pillow. There was an impression on her cheek from a blanket seam. Her mouth was almost in the shape, but not quite. The soundless scream hadn't learned her yet. Her eyes were on me the way mine were on me, disappointed and unsurprised. I took one step. The ballast rolled. The horn unrolled like a warning and a welcome. I took another step. Someone grabbed my coat from behind and yanked, hard. I staggered back. The lamp swung. The light fell off Leah's face and it blurred into the stream of others. Miguel. He had both fists in my jacket like he meant to pull me out of the world if he had to. "Don't," he said. His voice cracked. "Don't." The horn boomed, lower like a door shutting in a house you know too well. The knot train slid on through the crossing, faces smearing. The surface, not glass, not metal, rippling as if everything you could be was moving under it. The last knot car passed. There was no end to see. There was only the bell's echo and the red lights shutting off and the world resuming. The radio in my hand came back to life with Karen saying, "Copy?" Like I'd missed my name the first time. Miguel let go of my coat. His hands shook. Mine too. "You were going to step onto the rail," he said. It wasn't a question. "I know," I said. "What did you see?" "Nothing," I said, because he hadn't asked me to tell him a story. He'd asked me for a way to go home and sleep. We walked back to the yard. He smoked and I didn't say anything about signs or lungs. Karen handed me a work order like it was salve. The dawn came up thin and slow and we clocked out into a town that looked normal enough to trick you into forgiving it. That afternoon I texted Leah. "Coffee?" I wrote, "No time like the present." She replied, "Sure, tomorrow." It felt like pulling myself back from a long glass edge. That night, awake in the blue hour, I lay there listening to the river's hush and I thought about what you bring to the window and what the window gives back. I thought about the high rail truck that wasn't found and the bar of amber glare on the water that pulsed like a heartbeat and was gone. I thought about the cold press of a hand on my coat and how sometimes the person who saves you is just somebody who happened to turn their head at the right moment. This is where I tell you, I quit the railroad, or I asked for days, or I cut Pine Street out of my roots. I didn't do any of that. I still walk the tracks at night because jobs and ghosts share one truth. They're both better managed than avoided. I keep my radio charged. I clean the eyes of the crossing camera with my sleeve when Ruth forgets. I wave to the scheduled freights and I put my hand on the steel when there's no reason to, just to feel its stubborn warmth. And at 3 a.m., on fog nights, I do not stand in the window's reflection, except I do sometimes. I don't mean to. I'll be lining a switch or marking a split tie and I'll look up and there it is, sliding along the rails like an apology. It doesn't always come, but when it does, it's perfectly on time. And if you go down to the crossing and the fog is right and you lift your own light just a little, you'll see what you bring with you. You'll see your face and the faces you carry lined up against that knot glass like passengers trying to decide if they should get off. Sometimes, I think the train never stops because stopping is the one thing we refuse to do at that hour. When all the mistakes wake up and the town holds its breath, we just keep rolling. We go through whatever is in front of us. We pretend there's always another track, another timetable, another crossing where the gates go up and the bell shuts off and life resumes. But the other night I went to the diner at 3:20, long after the bells were quiet and the scheduled intermodal had blown through proper. June, the waitress, poured coffee for me and whoever else stays up to watch the river gnaw the same stone smooth. She said as if remembering a joke, "You hear that phantom tonight?" "No," I said. "Did you?" I heard the bell, she said. I saw the lights. I didn't look at the windows. She slid the coffee across like a precaution. That's the trick, right? I don't know, I said. We smiled like two people who have decided not to say the thing that's burning their tongues. On my way back to the yard, I crossed Pine Street and paused. The rails were quiet. The signal mast ticked. In my lamp's wash, I saw my own boots. No horn, no faces. Just me. I raised the lamp a little higher because I am weak and human and curious. My reflection in the signal bungalow glass looked remarkably like someone who'd slept. Then the lamp flickered, just a tiny wobble from a loose battery. For a second, in the turn of the light, the glass didn't show me. It showed a blank space, like the absence of a thing where a thing should be. It lasted one heartbeat. Then the light steadied, and there I was again. Tired, striped, breathing in the air that tastes like metal and pine. Maybe that's nothing. Maybe it's everything. If you ever find yourself in Dunsmore at 3 a.m., don't go to Pine Street to chase a story. The town already has one. Stay where you are and listen. You'll hear a horn maybe. You'll think you know what it means, but the tracks don't need you to understand them. They just need you to keep your feet off the steel when something you can't stop is coming through, and if you see your face in a passing car window, if you see the people you've carried pressed up against the glass, do what I didn't do the first time. Drop your eyes. Let it pass, because whether or not the train exists, it is perfectly on time. Because whether or not it ever stops, it knows exactly where you stand. And because some nights when the fog is low and the river speaks soft under the trestle, the only thing between you and that not glass is a friend's hand in your coat and the part of you that decides for once not to step forward. I don't usually post on here. I'm not a storyteller, and I don't want this turning into one of those "my grandpa told me" chain emails that everyone dogpiles. I'm writing this because there's a real place you can drive to, a place people visit every day with their kids and cameras and trail mix. It's not a legend. It has a ticket booth and a gift shop. It has a sign that says Bodie State Historic Park. The brochure calls it a town frozen in time, and they're not exaggerating. I used to work there. My name isn't important. If you've been, you may have seen me. Khaki shirt, radio on the shoulder, sunblock on the nose. Park ranger. I did night checks a couple times a month, locked things down after the last tour, made sure nobody got hurt trying to do dumb YouTube challenges in the dark. You know the drill. I need to lay a few things out so you don't think I misunderstood what I saw. Bodie sits out there in the high desert. Nothing but wind and hard light and buildings that look like they've been left mid-breath. By day it's loud. School groups, shutter clicks, the metal roofs popping in the sun. By evening the sound goes thin. Everything gets a dust smell. The tourists go back to Bridgeport or Mammoth or wherever they're staying. We lock the gate. The wind talks to itself between the buildings, and whatever the sun was holding down all day gets up and moves around. There's this old ranger joke. Bodie isn't abandoned. It's just ignoring you. We laugh when we say it, but everyone also says don't take anything from Bodie, not even a nail. People mail stuff back all the time, rocks, rust flakes, with letters about bad luck. I used to roll my eyes at that. I figured guilt makes people clumsy. I worked with another ranger most evenings, a guy named Miguel. He's the kind of person that looks calm even when he's mad. He carried a tiny spiral notebook in his pocket and wrote down little things he noticed. What building had a window cracked, which latch was sticking, tracks that didn't match our usual footprints. He made a game of spotting changes between day and night. There's a house at the far end, he told me on my first night shift. Looks like nothing. You'll know it because your eyes slide right past it the first 5 times. That's not helpful, I said. He shrugged. You'll see it. Then you won't stop seeing it. I thought he meant the Boone store or the Methodist church. Everyone fixates on those. But he didn't. We had a standard loop. Start near the stamp mill. Circle the main street, check doors and locks. Check the alarm box inside the museum room with the photos of early miners and their families. The glass cases full of letters and dishes and shoes. Then push out to the houses on the edges. No lights. The place is supposed to go black after sunset. That's our rule, the state's rule. We do it for safety, but also because people will swear up and down that they saw a candle flicker where there's no way for one to be. It starts rumors. Rumors bring people who don't respect fences. On my 3rd week I saw it. Not a rumor. An orange smudge of light moving inside a house near the northeast corner, where the town thins into brush and the hills creep close. It was the house Miguel meant because when I looked straight at it, I couldn't have told you a thing about its shape. It's like my brain kept deciding it was a shed, then a house, then two houses leaning on each other. I tapped my radio. "Miguel, you see that?" His voice came back with a hiss. "Where are you?" "Far end by the mining road cut, northeast side." "I think it's the last house." Silence. "Then hold position. I'm on my way." I stood there listening to my boots grind dust. The wind carried little pieces of other sounds, metal ticking as it cooled, a gate chain rattling, my own breath too loud in my ears. The light inside the house wasn't electricity. It was soft and alive like a kerosene lamp behind a shade. It flickered. I knew all the buildings were locked. I had personally checked them an hour earlier. We don't stage spooky lights. We don't do haunted tours, that's not the park's thing. Miguel came up beside me with his notebook already out. "You called it right," he said, like we were identifying a bird. "How?" "Don't know." He squinted. "It's on tonight." "On?"
He chewed the inside of his cheek.
"Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. We're going in, right?" I asked. "Procedure is procedure. If there's a fire hazard, if there's a trespasser, you don't pretend you didn't see it." Miguel waited. I could hear his radio scratching his shoulder when he breathed. Finally, he said, "We're going in." We crossed the hardpan. The house resolved itself as we got closer. Wood siding the color of old tea, 2 steps to a sunken porch, a door with glass panes warped like waves, windows filmed with a century of weather. The lamplight swelled and fell like whoever had it was pacing. I smelled the fuel before I felt the heat. Kerosene has this particular bite. It sits at the back of your throat. The door was locked. I put the key in. It turned too smoothly, like the lock had been used recently. "After you," Miguel said. "You're really making me go first?" "You saw it," he said, which was not an answer. We stepped inside and the temperature hit me like I'd walked through plastic into a heated room. Bodie is cold at night most of the year. Inside it was almost cozy. The first thing I noticed was not the lamp, though there it was, glass chimneys polished, wick trimmed neat, but the smell of bread. Not the stale flour odor you get from old kitchens. Fresh, yeasty, I could taste it. There were coats on hooks, a hat on the chair, a newspaper folded open to a weather page. The floorboards didn't moan when we stepped. They murmured. The lamp sat on a table with a ring of light where the shade met the base, like it had been warming that exact circle forever. Miguel's pen scratched his notebook. "Someone's living here?" I whispered, which didn't match anything my eyes were telling me. Everything was right and wrong. The coat was cut old, the hat was old, the newspaper print was the old heavy kind, but everything felt recently set down. We moved to the entryway, and that's when I saw the wall. The whole wall, from waist height to the ceiling, was lined with framed photographs. You know the kind. Glass that flashes your reflection if you stand wrong. A little cloud of dust hovering in the air in front of it. Except these weren't the old sepia family portraits the park displays. These were in color, crisp, modern, and every single one was of me. At first, my brain did a lazy denial loop. Okay, it's a guy who looks like me. Ranger uniform, beige shirt, white truck. Then I saw details that no one else would copy by accident. The scratch on my radio mic, the small burn mark on my right sleeve from a camp stove incident, the stain that looks like a map of Nevada on the cuff of my left pant leg. The photos were taken from angles that shouldn't exist. One of me through the windshield of my truck from the passenger seat when I drive alone, one from the ceiling of the museum, looking down at me as I checked the alarm panel, one behind my shoulder on the gated side of the stamp mill where only staff can go. I stepped closer. There was one of me in my apartment living room, sitting on the floor with a cardboard pizza box open watching a baseball game with my socks off. I live 30 miles away. No one has that angle. The blinds were down that night. I felt my face go hot and my fingers go stupid. I reached for the glass. Miguel's hand hit my wrist faster than I would have thought he could move. "Don't touch anything," he said. Someone was in my place. I could hear my voice trying hard not to crack. "Is this a prank?" "If it's a prank, it's the most committed one I've ever seen." He flicked his eyes across the frames. "You're in all of them?" "I think so." There was one from earlier that day. Same shirt, same unflattering sunblock smear. I could read the time on my watch in the picture because the sun had caught it just right. 4:27 p.m. I had been standing on the boarded porch of the schoolhouse taking a drink from my water bottle. The angle was from inside the building, behind the chalkboard, through the little vent holes. I hadn't felt watched. Miguel's radio crackled on his shoulder. We both jumped. It was the standard evening check-in from dispatch, just background noise, but it sounded wrong here. Liquid. Like the words had been poured into the room from the wrong direction. He answered it with his voice slightly higher than usual and kept it short. When he clipped the radio back, I saw his hand was shaking. "Leave it," he said. "We'll get a supervisor. We'll get a full team." "We can't leave a lit lamp," I said. "Fire hazard." "Then turn it off carefully and we go." That felt like waking up to a reasonable thought. I stepped around a low chair to get to the table. As I did, I caught the edge of something on the photos I hadn't noticed because I had been looking at my own face. There were little numbers in neat pencil under the bottom right of each frame. Not dates, coordinates, I recognized the pattern. Degrees, minutes, seconds, and these? I asked. Miguel leaned in. He frowned. "Where it was taken?" I swallowed. The coordinates under the pizza box photo were the coordinates of my apartment building. I turned the lamp wick down. The flame shrunk without guttering. The room got dimmer by a hair, no more than a thoughtful pause. But the smell of heat didn't change. That was wrong. If you've ever camped with a kerosene lamp, you know there's a hot, dusty smell that goes away when you turn the thing off. This one stayed like the air had a memory. Something upstairs popped. Not like an old house pop where wood shifts. This was a footstep on a stair that's learned the weight of a person and tells the rest of the steps about it. Miguel and I both tilted our heads at the same time, the way animals do at a sound they don't understand. Another step. Another. Measured. Coming down, Miguel said, calm voice. "We're leaving." We backed toward the door. The light made it hard to tell how far the doorway was. The edges of the room rounded out more than they should have. I found myself glancing at the photos in the glass and catching not my face but the back of my head in angle after angle, as if the photographer had been standing in the spot where I wanted to be. The steps reached the last stair and stopped. No breath sound. Just the idea of pause. "Hello?" I said, because people say dumb things when the part of the brain that believes in cause and effect starts to blink. A stair creaked in answer. Not a full step. A little wait. Waiting. Miguel's hand pressed between my shoulder blades. I took another step backwards, felt the cold seam of outside air around the door frame. Cut, and then my heel landed on the first porch. Bored. That's when the radio on my shoulder coughed out my own voice. "Think it's the last house," it said in my cadence, with my little run of words from 3 minutes earlier. "Far end. By the mining road cut." The radio fell loud in the quiet. "It's a device I've used 1,000 times. It doesn't have playback. It doesn't do that." I slapped at it, stupidly trying to turn it off, and it spit static that formed the shape of my name. Then Miguel's. Then something that wasn't a word but made every hair on my arm stand up anyway. Miguel took over. He put his mouth by my ear and said very clearly, "Move." We moved. We got the door open, we were on the porch, and for a second I thought the world would snap back into sense. Wind, dust, stars coming out hard and sharp. Instead, the light behind us deepened. It filled the doorway like water in a cut tank. I turned without wanting to and saw that the frames on the wall had new pictures in them. I know what you're thinking. No, not that they were different photos of me. They were the same photos, but I was farther away in them, like I'd stepped back. And in the shot from the schoolhouse porch, there was a reflection in the water bottle that hadn't been there before. A small round glow. The lamp? How would that make it into a reflection across town at 4 in the afternoon? We stepped onto the dirt, and I had this completely unhelpful thought that if I didn't look back again, nothing would follow me. So I didn't. I stared at Miguel's shoulder and the dust. He stepped up. I heard the lamp flame flick low again behind us, as if it were laughing without sound. Halfway to the main street, my radio hissed once more, and this time it said something that did sound like a word. It said, "Hungry, we didn't run." People trip when they run in Bodie at night. There are holes. There are boards with nails. We walked big steps fast, all the way back to the museum building, which has the only working alarm panel in town and a phone that does not depend on the radios when the radios decide to act like tape recorders. We called our supervisor. We told him someone had gotten into the far house, that there were pictures, that the lamp was on. He said to lock the door and wait by the gate. He said we'd meet a sheriff's deputy there. He said words that were normal. "Did you turn off the lamp?" he asked. And we both looked at each other over the phone, remembering that we had failed the simple task we'd set ourselves. "We tried," Miguel said. "We turned it down." On the walk back to the gate, the town didn't look different, but it felt like a person listening just past the next building. Every window was an ear. Every dark gap under a porch was a breath held. I kept my eyes on my boots. The deputy arrived. He had the look of a man who had done a lot of night drives for things that turned out to be teenagers or raccoons. He was polite, bored, faintly amused. We told him what we'd seen. I could feel myself editing as I talked, taking out the word hungry, not saying the radio did it in my voice. He walked out with us anyway. We showed him the house. It looked like a house, flat and empty. The door closed, no light. When I put the key in, the lock stuck like it hadn't been used in years. The chill inside hit us. No lamp, no smell of bread, no photos. The wall was bare, and by bare I mean nothing had ever been hung there. The plaster was clean in an impossible way for a century-old house. "I don't see a problem," the deputy said, because he needed to say something. He did a token check of the upstairs. Dust, mouse droppings, the kind of dark that makes your teeth ache, and we thanked him and he left, and we locked the gate, and I went home and sat in my apartment with all the lights on. You know, when you try to sleep and your brain plays the worst parts? The photos, my living room, the coordinates. I got up half a dozen times to walk around and check that the blinds were tilted down, that the chain lock was on, that no one would be taking a picture of me from the hallway. Around 3 a.m., I convinced myself I had overreacted, and that the smart thing to do was go in early, before the tourists, and look at that house again with sunlight in it. I got to the park just as the sky was pretending it would be warm. The wind was already gnawing. I told myself I was just doing a safety check. Miguel wasn't on the roster that morning. I didn't radio anyone. I unlocked the gate, I drove in, I parked near the main street, and I walked straight to that house on the northeast corner without letting my eyes blur their way over it. The house door was already unlocked. I knew it was wrong to go in. I went in. The lamp wasn't lit. The room was gray with pre-dawn light. The air smelled like old wood and dried-out paper, the way it always does. The wall was bare. I stood there feeling insane, and then I saw the thing that made me drop my keys. On the table where the lamp had been the night before, someone had left a single photograph. No frame, just a glossy print, a little curled from how it had dried. It was of me standing in the doorway where I was standing now, taken from somewhere between my shoulder blades and the doorframe. In the photo, I am holding a set of keys. My watch reads 6:12 a.m. I looked at my watch. It read 6:12 a.m. The little team in my brain that handles don't do dumb stuff had been out to lunch all night, but they clocked in right then. I took 2 steps back without turning around, felt the frame of the door hit my elbow and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't look behind me. I walked straight to the main street, sat down on the lip of the boardwalk in front of the store with my hands between my knees like a kid who has made himself very small to avoid being chosen for anything, and watched the light come up. I turned my radio on. It was just static. I turned it off. I called Miguel on my phone. He didn't pick up. I called my supervisor and left a message that said I felt sick. I didn't tell anyone about the photo. That would be the end of it, if it were a story about a place you shouldn't be at night. But it isn't. It came home. 2 days later, there was an envelope under my apartment door when I got home. No return address, just my name. Inside there were 4 photographs. One was of me asleep from the angle of my bedroom ceiling fan. One was of me at the grocery store looking down at avocados, my hand testing the top like I always do for ripeness. One was of me in the Ranger truck from behind my ear, the camera up against the headrest. The last was of the far house in Bodie, at dusk, lamplit, window glowing like a second sun swallowed and held in a human mouth. There were numbers on the back of each one in pencil, coordinates. They were correct. After that, they started showing up once or twice a week. Under the door, in my mailbox, tucked under the wiper of my truck. Always pictures of me from angles I couldn't defend against without living in a concrete tube. Sometimes there would be photos of the park, the schoolhouse, the mill, the museum room where the alarm panel is, but they would be empty except for a little shape of orange light reflected in a surface that shouldn't have anything to reflect. The radio would occasionally cough out a piece of something I'd said hours earlier. I'd be halfway through a sentence and hear the first half. It made conversations with visitors feel like I was always repeating myself. Miguel noticed I was unraveling. He cornered me by the storeroom, which smells like rope and dust and hand soap, and said, "Tell me." "All of it," I told him. He listened. He didn't laugh. "There's a story," he said when I finished choosing his words. From the old days, miners would come back to camp drunk and talk about a house on the edge of town that fed itself. Like it took what you brought it and kept it. Fed itself, I said. Like he'd said the word hungry, and we both pretended I hadn't already heard it. "Things in this place like loops," he said. "You put a nail in your pocket, the town takes your luck. You bring back the nail, it returns the luck in pieces. Maybe this is like that. Maybe you looked hard and it looked back, and now it's returning the look. What do I do?" I asked. He scratched a note in his notebook. "Some people say to mail things back. You could try mailing it a picture of itself." His smile was thin. "Or you could quit. Not in the official sense, just stop noticing." I lasted another week. Then a tourist kid, 10 maybe, ran up to me on the main street and asked if he could see the photos. "What photos?" I asked, because I'd gotten good at lying to kids. "In your house," he said. "My sister saw them last night. They had snuck in when they camped at the pullout down the road. They'd gone through the fence. They'd walked past the do not enter signs. It was a dare. The boy said there had been a light." He described the room. He described the wall. "Were they old-timey pictures?" I asked, trying not to push my voice through his chest. He shook his head. "They were you. There were a lot. My sister said it was like the house was a phone and it had a folder for you. She said we should get out before we got a folder too." I typed out my resignation that night. I told myself I was leaving for better pay. I told myself I wanted a different park with more trees. I told myself that if I didn't go, I would end up back in that house at 6:12 in the morning staring at the back of my own skull. I moved. I didn't say goodbye to anyone properly. I didn't write my supervisor the honest version. I rented a place with thick curtains and bought a different brand of radio alarm clock that didn't talk back. For a while, the photographs stopped. I started to sleep again. Then last week, someone slipped a postcard under my front door. It was one of those vintage-looking ones with a picture of the main street in Bodie. On the back, in neat pencil, 38-1243-1, Honda 19-040W. Under that, my new address. You can look up those coordinates if you want. They're the park entrance. The postcard wasn't postmarked. Someone hand-delivered it. Last night I took out the stack of photographs I hadn't thrown away. I don't know why I keep them. It feels like evidence and confession both. I spread them on the table. There's an angle that recurs in them if you look long enough. Always from slightly behind me, slightly above me. Like someone standing on a stair that isn't there. I realized that if you laid them in order by the little pencil numbers on the backs, they made a kind of map. Not of geography, but of vantage point. Whoever, whatever was taking them was getting closer. The last ones were practically at my shoulder. I could see the pores on my skin. I'm not posting this as "and then I saw a face" or "and then the door slammed," because those are good story beats and I don't want to give you any. This isn't a story beat. This is a thing that keeps happening. I don't go out after dark anymore. I keep a chair under the doorknob even though I know that chairs under doorknobs are mostly for your own sense of control. I don't look in mirrors at night. I sleep with a hat on the coat hook by the door because in that house there was a hat on a hook, and somehow it felt right to return the shape to the world. Today, around noon, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. A single photograph. Me this morning, sitting at my kitchen table with the stack of photos laid out like a fan. The angle was from the hallway. The hallway was empty. The little pencil numbers had changed. They weren't coordinates anymore. They were times. The last one says 10:03 p.m., which is half an hour from now as I'm typing this. I know what you want me to do. Leave. Call the police. Call Miguel. Burn the pictures. Burn the house down. Move to another state. Get religion. I have thought of all of those. I have tried some of them. You can't burn something that doesn't admit it exists in this world when anyone else is looking. You can't call in a description that makes sense without sounding like you need an evaluation. And moving just gives whatever this is a new set of coordinates. This is not a warning like, don't go there, people will always go there. It's a good Instagram. There's a velvet rope at the saloon and dust on the bottles. What I'm saying is, if you go at dusk and you see a warm light in a house that doesn't want to sit still in your vision, don't be curious. Don't be me. Don't teach it the shape of your face and the way your mouth moves when you say your own name into a radio. I've positioned my laptop so the camera points at the door, which is, I realize, an example of exactly the kind of mistake that got me into this. I can smell something faint now, not bread, but kerosene, the kind that nests at the edges of your tongue. Somewhere upstairs in my building, there's a creak that is not wood. It is a step remembering weight. The streetlight outside my window has a halo. I went to turn the blinds so I wouldn't see the glow, and in the reflection I thought for a second I saw a room that looked like it belonged in a different century. A room where a lamp burns and a table waits and the air still thinks it's warm. This post won't fix anything. It's not meant to. But maybe when you go to Bodie and you look at the framed photos in the museum, and you tilt your head and watch your own reflection hover like a ghost in the glass, you'll remember that some places have feeds open all the time. Some places are always listening in one direction or another, saving what they catch in neat frames, writing little numbers in the corner for later. Maybe you'll remember that a house that needs people isn't always the kind you want to walk into, and that sometimes the last house you see isn't the last house at all. It's the first one that noticed you. The time on my watch just flipped to 10:03 p.m. There's a new photo on my table that I didn't put there. It's of my front door from the angle of a person who is, at this exact moment, standing right behind me.